you see under the light? Yeah, I was like, can you see if that, sometimes this is not.
I just remember the other saying it was because we wanted.
Okay, so this is, remember last time I had to use your fingers for whatever reason I don't have fingerprints? Will you just try it? Yeah. I don't know, like it doesn't, when it hits it, it works.
This one right here? So we want that projector, right?
No, we want this one, yeah, this one.
Hit that guy?
Yeah, like it.
Then you should have marked it as such, and you didn't do that.
No.
That's why you didn't.
ISPC.
It wasn't because
Camera metrics.
You know what?
we didn't mark it as such.
Is the center projector on?
It was all on when I walked out.
So we go center projector.
It's not coming.
So no, it's okay.
Oops.
It's okay.
Oh, all righty.
It'll be a story.
This is audio only.
Oh, I love it.
So now hit
I
that
kind of
again.
like this.
It's not picking up from here. So first of all, it's here. There.
Now you're gonna lift that guy back up.
Thank you.
That's going up.
Right.
What I had to do earlier was I had to turn it to laptop and then back. And that did the trick.
So they're both
but I
going
don't
up.
know.
What's going, I think we've got some short then, and it's not picking up. This is not picking up anymore.
So now we're back to at least to the start.
We good? It's 5:31.
There we go. Just wait. It's on now. Just it timed out. It's okay. It's green flashing. It's gonna come on. Just give it a second. That one's off, so it's not gonna show up. It should. So there it is. It's coming. Just give it a second. No, don't mute it. There we go. Okay. Give it a second. There she is. You're good.
I gotta pull the agenda.
It's right there.
Okay, perfect.
All right, good evening. I'd like to call this meeting to order, the work session policy review. And Dr. Watts, I'd like to ask you to begin the work session, please.
Absolutely. Thank you, President Vengadasala, members of the board, Ms. Holly, and staff and friends. I'm going to call on Chief Accountability Officer, Dr. Jewel Harmon, to begin our presentation and the continuing updates and improvements on our policy work. Dr. Harmon, the floor is yours.
Good evening, President Vengadaslam, Dr. Watts, Ms. Holly. It's a pleasure again to be here tonight to talk about policy. We'll pick up where we left off last week. There were 4 policies that, based on conversation with the board last week, led us to a second reading and discussion. And those 4 are here, and we'll go through those tonight. I thought about preparing a presentation, and then thought instead I'd actually open up the documents and we talk about the changes that are reflected based on what we discussed last week. So I'll start with policy 1400, meeting conduct, order of business, and quorum. Director Strauss, is it more helpful if we face the screen so you can see, or are you?
I have the policies up in front of me, so I should be good.
Okay.
Thank you.
So when we were discussing this, there was some conversation about redundant messaging. So there were some things in there that were part of the model policy that just didn't make sense for Kent. We've had a website for a while. We didn't need to flaunt that we've had a website for a while. We could remove that. Obviously, we have more than 10 employees. We don't have to say that unless at some point we don't have 10 employees, we don't need to have a website. So removed that language. I'll come back to the should we keep this statement in just a second. The other piece that we updated was about the meeting locations held other than at headquarters, was something that was part of the WASDA model that remains there. And then in the quorum and voting, I struck the clause for school boards with 5 members because it seemed a bit redundant. We have 5 members, let's just say that the math is 3 for a quorum instead of saying if we have 5.
There's only one that has 7. So.
It just seemed a little, it was in the same vein of, it's like, well, again, we're here, we know our 5. This was actually redundant information here about under special circumstances, the board may waive. It was stated twice, and there wasn't really a reason why it needed to be stated twice. So I just struck the second reading of that. And then the meat of your changes were about the public comment section. The WASDA model policy that I presented last week said that it was at the beginning of a meeting, that communication happened at the beginning of the meeting. Our process does not reflect that. So this next draft reflects during the communication portion of the agenda, during each regular meeting, leaving space for a procedural change if you choose to move it to the beginning or keep it where it is, because there was some discussion about that. It's not necessarily codified in policy there. And then you asked that I bring in more language that is current and inclusive of our current process. So I used the sign-up card, the blue cards that our public use to make comment, and I used the kind of direction and guidance that President Vengadaslam gives at the beginning of each board meeting about how to address the board when that happens, and included that in that public comment section. So wishing to address the board, no time after agenda item 3.0. Right now we limit to 3 minutes, so it reflects that 3 minutes.
So this is where I want discussion of not knowing what we did before. What is besides efficiency, any historical precedent or reasoning on 3 minutes per speaker? And then also the not accepting items, this is the board as well, later than agenda item 3. What's the reason that we want to keep that? We know what it does, right, because it does it now. And limiting to 3 minutes. Limiting is appropriate, but is 3 minutes still relevant to us?
That is completely up for discussion. So the reason that a time-bound placement is put there at all and is discussed under WASDA model policy is because time isn't infinite, meaning that in an effort to ensure that whatever optimal number of comments the board chooses to hear from the public, they are given the amount of space and time that they dedicate to that. What is that right balance? So for example, last week you all talked about possibly limiting that to an hour. So say we took that as the space. You may say that it's 5 minutes. Well, then that gives you 12 speakers. If you do 3 minutes, then that gives you 20. So I mean, I think it's kind of the balance of what is that right mix of appropriate amount of time to present their topic, issue, concern, question to the board, while balancing that with recognizing that sometimes there are several members of our public who would like to speak, and what that looks like with possibly a meeting lasting several hours at a time, or how much time is dedicated to public comment. As far as the history of that, I think that might be more a place for discussion with the board rather than from me. But I think that's the rationale for why time limit. So I will step back and let the discussion take place.
It's been 3 minutes ever since I've been on the board.
Okay.
9 years.
So, been there a while.
Yeah, and I would say that 3 minutes has been there for a while. At one point, I think we were actually less than 3 minutes. I think there have been cases where we actually dropped it down to 2, just because of the volume of people that wanted to speak and to be able to hear as many people as we could. I've found over the years that I think 3 minutes is usually a sufficient amount of time for people to express their thoughts.
Yeah. It seems to be. I would know if we talked about an overall time bound. Are we interested in saying time for communication is 90 minutes at maximum, assuming we ever hit the 90 minutes, which has happened once or
Many
twice,
times.
maybe.
Maybe yeah.
Well, but
Historically.
Historically.
Yeah.
And so are we interested in that at all? Saying, okay, we're gonna do 90 minutes and then we'll say, whatever we say, no more. Thanks for coming.
Yeah. I guess I'm with the party that dealt with over 90 minutes, you know, on several occasions, and we're just going to be making exceptions to exceptions, I think, at that point. How do we ensure that there is equity in voices being heard, you know, if we are not kind of parceling out the time with all those who would like to speak?
Right, and again, you know, trying to step back and take notice of our own experience, the comment portion doesn't make the meeting happen. I mean, the point of the meeting is to do the business of the agenda. And of course, having people speak to agenda topics is good. I think we have that because then we can know it before it happens. But the general comment portion at the end, you know, doesn't add action to the meeting. It potentially just sets up a bunch of stuff for future meetings. So I don't know, is anybody interested in time bounding that at a total time, regardless of speakers?
I'm not.
Yeah.
I'm not. 3-minute limit, and then with the turning the cards in by a certain time, I think limits people just coming up throughout the whole meeting, handing the
Yeah.
cards that are on usually a repetitive subject.
People should be reviewing the agenda in advance and
Yeah.
seeing if they want to speak or not. If they can't make it in time, I know that they've given a card and said, you know, please submit this on behalf of myself, and they're able to speak at that point. So,
Because
Yeah.
only with that one specifically, if we had a couple times to where, in recent memory, when cards come after 3.0, just people probably don't remember or whatever reason,
Yeah.
and not included those in the speaking, therefore that they, I don't know if they're gonna come back. I don't know if we even keep track of who that was, so we know if their question was addressed.
and that's a good point. How do we
That's not really this
allow
policy,
them
but-
to communicate? So that's a good question. I don't think I have an answer, and I don't know what Karen does with those cards, but we can find out and follow up on those cards, because I think that's
Well,
important.
here's my, I guess, question of why 3.01. Because I had a friend from Kentwood, and she came to the last meeting, and she needed to speak for her civics class. She works. She came in, I think, exactly at the presentation. I told her, you need to hand a card in as soon as possible, and she did, and she wasn't called. And as a result, she just had to take a picture up here, and that counted, but she didn't speak. And I think still, on the cards, the fact that if you check the student box means you technically speak first, I don't think that's going as far as possible, considering a lot of students don't come to board meetings. I don't understand why 3.01, which is right before, like, is it right before presentations start, or is it right after presentations
Yeah, right
end? Or why
before.
can't it be the beginning of 4.0? Because on some meetings, it goes until, like, 6.0, some meetings goes until 9.0. You know, there's like 9 different categories of different things, and I don't know if that's necessarily equitable about always saying this. Why not at a specific time and not an agenda item? I don't know, but.
Well, because for the time thing I'm worried about is, say we don't have presentations, or because 2 is usually talking, right? Recognitions is this thing in front of me. So not really action recognition. 3 is presentations, which is effectively information non-action. At least there's usually no motions in the presentations. So I think by the 4, 4.0 is the actual action part, the motion, approve, whatever we do. So that's where I think it's definitely by that, because that's the action portion. I don't necessarily want to interrupt the action portion of the meeting with someone. It's like, oh, you already voted on 2 items, but now I want to submit a card. But that being said, 3.0 is just presentations. There's no actual, at least in my recent memory, there's no actions taken, meaning no
Keep in
board
mind also,
vote.
we have our budget presentations now up there.
Right, so we do have, so
Financial
we do have more
statements.
up there in 3.0. And so that's where I'm like 3 or 4, kind of ambivalent, but
Yeah, I'm not opposed to it, and I don't remember exactly why we did 3.0. It was a suggestion, and I don't think it's set in stone, but is there anybody who objects to Debbie 3.0 being?
Whether it's 3.0 or 4.0, I don't know if it makes, I like the fact that we've said that they need to be in by a certain point in the meeting. I think it helps with the meeting and being able to keep business and things flowing. I don't really have any preference whether it's 3.0 or no later than 4.0.
Yeah, I feel the same way. Sometimes 3.0 is real fast.
Yeah.
It happens really fast. And if there are people, as you say, who are late to the meeting, cuts them out. So,
Which isn't
That's what-
fair.
That's what
yeah.
happened.
And
Yeah, I remember the student, and it's just once or twice I made exceptions because I am a wuss saying no. And then just kind of happened, and so then we had to be more strict about it. So, but if we say 4.0, then that sounds good.
yeah.
Okay,
So,
4.0 it is.
and I appreciate that discussion, not only that component, we'll follow up with Karen, because we do note when those cards come in, and we note when they are noted as late, but we do review the information and follow up to the extent that we can.
Okay, great.
I heard the use of the word equity, and I want to make sure we're all on the same page, going back to the Ross, to your point about the openness of time, and then to the current status of using a 3-minute rule. And most school districts that I know of have a time limit, and the reason is not equity, it is based on equality. It's the one time where equality is the standard, given that each member, regardless of what it is that they wish to speak on, that everyone has an equal amount of time to share their concerns or thoughts. So that's, again, something for us to consider as we work towards equity, but that's the one time where equality is our standard. I just want to make sure that was noted.
Noted. Thank you.
So based on the discussion I heard, it seems as if where I hear that you'd like to have a cutoff because it helps with the flow of the meeting, it helps give a sense of the length of time, but where that cutoff happens is somewhat arbitrary because based on the things that are in the agenda, it could be 3.0. And typically discussion and approval happens at 4.0. Tonight is an example where it happens at 5.0. So if, based on what I've heard, I'd like to make the suggestion that maybe the language here is not about the number of the agenda section, but the title of the section is prior to the beginning of the discussion and approval section. Because then that would address Director Hardy's concern of if they'd like to comment on something where we're going to take an action, that they have an opportunity to do that before the board takes action.
But that's already written into that.
Yes, but it's referred to as a number rather than, so I'm saying instead of putting a number, let's just call it the discussion prior to the start of the discussion and approval section of the agenda, rather than saying 3.0 or 4.0.
That's fine. That makes sense. Yes.
Then that it ensures that for those who don't come in or come in the midst of the reporting section or comes in the midst of the presentation section, they still have an opportunity to express wanting to be heard.
The only concern is that we have in the past, we've padded a number of things prior to discussion and approval. There have been just board of directors discussion. So this could be a 6.0, but then we're kind of extending, at that point, you're just kind of, so that, I think that was the reason that Karen suggested 3.0. But, I guess.
My only concern is it could be, even though we're not the one, Dr. Harvey, when you said discussion and approval, I know that when we have a presentation, we do a discussion, and I don't know if that would be confusing to somebody if there wasn't, a number is pretty clear. So if we say 4.0, it doesn't matter what 4.0 is on the agenda, people would know that the card has to be in by that time. where if I was someone who maybe English wasn't my first language, would I be as prone to know when it says discussion and approval that we meant that particular title?
I'm good with 4.0.
Given that, fine with that.
Okay,
I hear 4.0.
4.0.
Okay.
Whatever that is,
Right, whatever.
whatever that becomes.
And were we on agreement then that we're keeping it the 3 minutes?
That is what, I didn't hear any,
Yeah.
it didn't seem like there was a consensus to change the time from 3 minutes. The other placeholder that I had here, when I made a note more to myself, but to call it attention to you as a board, it was all regular meetings of the board will be held within the district boundaries. And the reason why I question keeping this statement is because later on in the public notice piece, I believe that's the section where it talks about meetings can be held at a place other than the boardroom. It talks about them being held at other locations. It talks about digital meetings where technically none of the members have to be present but could all coexist virtually, as long as there is a means for the public to weigh in and continue to have comment through this virtual board meeting. Not saying that that's a direction that you're headed, but do you want it stated in policy that they have to take place within the district boundaries? Because if you were having a virtual meeting, that means that technically you may not be within district boundaries. So that's why I kind of left that as, do you want to keep this statement here? All regular meetings of the board will be held within the district boundaries.
I have thoughts. How about you? Start with-
I mean, I think it is. I think that the meeting itself, this is agnostic of who attends and what board members are where, that the regular meeting should be held within the district boundaries. Now, that doesn't necessarily specific to this boardroom, because, moving around gym or something like that, that's fine too. I think overall, as a general statement, it's kind of there too, so that you would know if you read this policy where the meeting's going to be. It's not it wouldn't ever be in an inaccessible place, let's say. Even though we don't think like we want to do that, we would do it for that purpose, but you would read this and say, oh, it's going to be somewhere within the boundaries. Meaning I'm fine as is.
Okay.
So, and I'm trying to remember, we've had a couple of times where we've actually held a joint board meeting with another board, such as the Green River Community College Board, when we were opening up IGRAD. I believe that one was at Kent Lake, so that was within district. And I'm trying to remember if there were any other ones where we've done those special circumstances where we were not in, because it was a joint meeting between two governing boards, and we literally both opened the meetings and both went through things. And I believe they were all within our district boundaries, but I am not 100% sure.
But was it a regular
Yeah.
board meeting?
Yeah, I remember that one too, that was at Kent Lake, and I don't remember, in as long as I've been on the board, I don't remember anything outside of the district.
Okay.
Been in City of Covington, City of Kent.
Okay.
So, Dr. Harmon, your question really is, does virtual meetings fit into that boundary category? I mean, that's-
I don't think it's something that we were planning, and I don't think it's something that we have to change. It was just acknowledging that, is that something that I didn't want later to become an issue if,
Yeah.
and that's why I brought it to the attention. So it doesn't seem to be a concern, so it's not a big deal. It wasn't a suggestion to change, it was just, did it need to be there?
Box, that's good.
Okay. So then the answer to that is yes, we should keep this statement. So based on the three kind of ideas that I've heard, the idea of not including a time-bound constraint around the public comment section of the agenda, making it 4.0 regardless of the section title, for submission, for the deadline for submission of comment cards, and then keeping the statement about regular meetings being held within district boundaries. Are you comfortable with seeing this on the consent agenda for the May 22nd meeting? Or would you like for this to roll into another work session for?
I don't think we need another work session on this one.
No.
Okay, just want to make sure, I just want to make sure. Okay.
Appreciate that.
Of course, I will make the changes and you'll see those changes in the next, but, okay. All right, moving on.
Debbie, you're good with that?
Yes, sorry. I didn't think, you must not have heard me. Yeah, I'm good.
1420 is the second reading of the agenda. There was some discussion in this particular policy last time about the process of the board president, superintendent, and board directors working together to set the agenda, and making sure that it was consistent language, because sometimes they said board, sometimes there was weird language in there, and it wanted that consistent as well. And about members of the board wishing to add topics to the agenda will communicate those items to the board president and superintendent as early as possible to ensure that staff have time to prepare. I looked at other districts. I looked at WASDA model procedure, and there wasn't a whole lot about how boards choose to do that. And so I'm going to open up that space, because that seemed to be Director Daniels' concern last week about how do we ensure that everything that the board is interested in hearing makes its way to an agenda. So I didn't see any recommendation on how to include that, so I figured I'd let you all discuss that more to see if there's a way that you'd like to see that, or.
Any thoughts? Let's start with us.
My personal opinion is that, and it might just because of how long the meetings are, but considering there are other school districts that have public comment at the beginning of the meeting, and based on what Director Daniels said last meeting, I would be interested in just having discussion now about moving it to the beginning of the meeting. That being said, I think another question is, and the other thing is, like, as a student representative, I can't see any situation where I would want an agenda item except for maybe a presentation or maybe the student representative report to be on the agenda. Those are the only two things I could think of. And in that being said, I would be interested in how I would communicate those items to the board president and superintendent as early as possible. And as a board member, and how that would roll into.
Let me try and understand.
Yeah.
So you're wondering at the student report portion, that's when you're.
Well, yeah, I mean, it says that members of the board, which would include me,
Yes.
wishing to add topics to the agenda will communicate those items to the board president and superintendent as early as possible. So I guess my only question is, I'm assuming whatever process that there is on how board members will submit that to the board president and superintendent would also include the student representative. I'm just expressing my viewpoint, then other than the student representative report and maybe a presentation about a particular program or school or something like that, I can't think of anything where a student representative would need something to be on the agenda.
I see, gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I think, well, let me.
Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, okay. We actually had a suggestion that for that last sentence in that first paragraph, the board secretary shall be responsible for preparing the agenda for each meeting in accordance with the board president. We had a suggestion that it be with a second revolving member of the board, which I think is a nice option. So I just like the idea of having two people in there, because you get two brains are better than one, and if you forget something, the other person can come up with something. And that way we can always have, people will feel like they've had some say. And I've never felt like we couldn't suggest that we need something, we'd like to hear something in the agenda. And I know you did this year, and I have earlier, either last year or earlier this year, I don't remember which, but yeah. I don't feel like we need anything stated in here on how to do it, but I'm open to it too.
What's the thing, coming in new, there was no known process. There's no
Yeah.
process to say, I was like, an ask the president or superintendent, I'm interested in learning about this. Do you have someone who can present on this, or can we get this topic up there? And what I'm wondering about, and this is where I think I was the only one thinking this way, was do we want a more formal process where we put ideas on there and then we actually have to have agenda items, I don't know, supported or promoted or something like that, so that we say, okay, let's all put something in a hopper. Here's the top two things I want on the agenda, and then from that hopper, the board president and the board secretary would choose any additional agenda items to go on there. More formal, even though that's kind of describing the same process, it just makes it so that both, well, to the extent possible, that we know about any requested agenda items from other board members.
Right, I think that's important.
So, I would say that I'm okay with the language the way it is in the policy. We also have it in our protocol that says that, we agree to ask the board president and the superintendent to place an item on the agenda. I would think that the more appropriate place, if we want a little bit more clarity on how that looks, that we agree upon that as a board and then add it to our protocol, rather than try and put it into policy.
Yeah.
Yeah, you mentioned that last week, and I agree with that as well. Is that something we want to discuss separately?
Well, yeah, because it doesn't seem like, given the other content of this policy, it doesn't seem like this is the right place to put that. This just talks about what do we do with an agenda and a consent agenda. So I think that's where we take it away, not here. We take it away to the protocol discussion.
So we do need to set a time for that.
I'm looking at it right now.
And I think one of the things that Denise made very clear, to me anyway, is that I think the issue of when there are issues that come up from the communication from the audience, how are we following up the action steps we're taking? And so do we want to see some of that get included into the agenda? And I think, Austin, you had a good suggestion to maybe have a discussion at the end of the meeting about, do we want to see some of these items come up for discussion at the next regular board meeting? Do we want to see it in the presentation area, or which section of the agenda do we want to see some of those items? So, I mean, I guess all of that could be part of that protocol discussion.
So what I hear, based on the discussion, isn't so much that there are additional changes to the language in the policy, but we have our next upcoming session is a 2-hour session on the 29th. I can set aside a portion of the meeting dedicated to protocol development for you all, meaning that you just have the space to kind of discuss what that looks like, since you don't have to schedule another meeting. It's already a meeting scheduled. It's around the policy work. We can put that on the agenda. And then that'll allow you time to kind of flesh out some of that. Is that okay?
Sounds great.
Okay. And so, based on that, if I accept the changes that are presented here, are you comfortable with seeing this on the consent agenda on the 22nd? Okay.
Yeah.
I'm good. Debbie?
Yes.
Yeah.
Unmute. Do we have, I know there are times when the agenda is posted and then for some reason an item's taken off the agenda before we actually get to the meeting date, for whatever reason. Do we have any protocol or any procedure that says we need to say why that was taken off? Do we need to announce why it was taken off? Because I know people have wondered at times why that was taken off, but it's not really stated anywhere, or at least not in policy. I don't know if it's that big a deal.
Right, it's changes to the agenda, and so
Yeah.
changes would include, and we usually add supplemental personnel reports, but include removing items, like there was one maybe last time, maybe the time before,
Yeah.
that was removed prior to the start of the meeting, or we were informed about it at the start of the meeting, however that was.
Yeah.
Um,
But I just wonder if the public would need to know, why did you take that off the agenda?
But we did inform, if it's not personnel, or I think property issues.
Correct. We would inform during the regular meeting, or or Karen would place that in the protocol to say an agenda item was either removed or some different action was taken according to that agenda item. But did you have a specific example that?
Well, so, I mean, there was a specific example, I don't know the name of it was about some surplus of property. Something.
Macmillan property?
Sure. I forget if it was on the consent agenda or not, but it just removed itself from the agenda. And so this is where, part of it, the formal thinking is any changes to the agenda, including removing an item, in removing the action on it are part of the things that might have to be, the agenda has to be 24 hours in advance, including a new agenda with the item removed. So is that, I think what I say is, what is that process to make sure that the full agenda is on there 24 hours in advance? It's fine, and then of course, if we have anything that comes up, we vote to add it on when we open the meeting.
Can we add that
Or remove.
as a statement that we reserve the right? I mean, sometimes there's not enough information, or I think we had a situation where Dave was not present or something.
There may be.
And, yeah.
Well, yeah, a variety of
Information.
information, because I think this, we're talking about, the agenda is available online Friday evening preceding the regular meeting, but we also have that statement about it being, well, that's scratched there, but it was in the other one, that it had been 24 hours in advance. And so I think that just making sure that we're comfortable with that even though it's out there as of Friday, it can be amended, and there, to your point, do we have to notify of any amendment to the agenda? Once it's been first.
Sure we confirm the.
There's have to
that
versus
is a
like to.
process we-
So you want to add that, okay.
Okay.
Okay. And Mr. Heath, ever an advocate for his policy work, is present, like just on time as I'm walking out and run back in. Actually, 3226, interviews and interrogations of students on school premises. The discussion in this one wasn't so much about the actual policy. I think Director Daniels had some questions and concerns about procedure and about the extent to which a trusted adult could be present. And so the ask was more about being able to see the procedure. And so what I'll open here is the actual procedure. We can talk a little bit more about some of that detail of what is there. And so the procedure is rather lengthy, and as Mr. Heath, Executive Director Heath, discussed, it reflects the differentiation between whether the student being interviewed is a witness or a victim or the alleged perpetrator of the act. And so what rights, responsibilities are available are dependent there pursuant to the law. And age of the student a little bit. And so this is very much driven by RCW and law, and so it doesn't get into an additional trusted adult being there. It leans toward parent, guardian, and what is required under the law of notification based on age, and then
Dr. Harmon, did you receive any feedback from Director Daniels? I know she's unable to be here this
No,
evening.
I didn't receive any communication from Director Daniels about this. And so I'm comfortable with letting it continue on because it was mostly her questioning and wanting to see this. But I did want to acknowledge that the question was around the procedure. The procedure is here. It's all entirely new. So it's not something that existed in KSD before. It would have been, the whole thing would have been read. So rather than making the whole thing read,
No, understood.
yes, it's a lot easier to read.
It does talk about, I think to Director Daniels' point, it talks about notice to parent guardian, right? And that, or presence of principal or designee, but it doesn't necessarily talk about if that's not available, what other, like, again, asking the student for some other trusted adult. It says that, it talks about one, a principal or designee, even necessarily from the student's point of view or student selection.
And I think that was her, if I can make any interpretation of her concern, was that it seemed to be not as student focused. So this is pursuant to the law. What are the requirements to notify the parent of what is happening? Not necessarily who is there to support the student in going through this process. And so even the section here that I have up at section 4 about interview of student, it speaks to the principal or designee making reasonable effort to notify the parent of the interview. And if in the opinion of the law enforcement officer that notification doesn't hinder the investigation, the principal or designee cannot prevent the interview from taking place, even if the parent or guardian can't be notified. And so again, it's not, I think her concern was kind of where's the student focus and student care in this? And I'm not sure legally how far we can go with in terms of how to push that. I say that we can talk within our district about procedurally making every best attempt to include our parents, and obviously student safety. But I don't know if, Mr. Heath, you have anything to add to that, but I think that.
Yeah, I mean, we've also vetted this with our,
talked about the partnership.
police officer contacts in Kent School District and Covington and King County. And they made it clear that, they'll try to work with us, but if they feel like this is going to hinder to have parents know before. I mean, sometimes it's, for whatever reason, maybe they're also involved in the criminal act or something to this effect. They may make the call and say, no, you cannot be a part, and no, you cannot contact the parents. And our administrators would risk, being charged themselves with interference of a criminal investigation. So we don't want to put our principals into a bad spot either. So.
So one question I had, I actually was speaking with Director Daniels, is are we looking through all of these policies with the equity lens, the WASDA equity process, or how are we even using that?
So I will say that we have not. We've leaned on the WASDA model policy because we're trusting that to not circumvent RCW or WAC or law. It doesn't mean that we can't apply the equity lens, but it would definitely take probably a deeper consult with either Tim or Curtis to make sure that whatever decisions we're making or changes based on equity is not going to put us in a liability. So there's this balance. And I'm not saying that we don't make obviously equity-based decisions. And I'm not suggesting that you're saying that either, but we would definitely need to make sure we're in consult so that we're not putting ourselves in a liability or risk situation.
It's a fair question, and I think it's the right question to ask. I'll be quite frank. It is essentially adding a completely separate and equal step to this process, because some of the questions that we ask would lead to, as Dr. Harmon said, perhaps some other challenges that maybe put us in a legal or a vulnerable legal position or otherwise. But again, the right question to ask. Dr. Harmon, I think that's
I just made a
conversation for us to talk about how might we embed or include either all or parts of those 5 questions in this process.
Okay, thank you.
So I think what I heard from the beginning, and based on where we ended, that this is going to go for an additional reading. We're just not ready yet. There's some things that, even though it's in procedure, I think these two will very tightly go together. And so as we make some procedural adjustments, you may want to wait on adopting policy. So.
So there was a discussion, again, with Director Daniels about that. We just to clarify, we are not approving the procedure. We're approving the policy. But we should be reviewing procedures along with the policies. So just as clarification. Yeah.
Yes, and it's just because it's only because this procedure is so lengthy and so sensitive that I'm making the suggestion that in this instance, the two go hand in hand, at least for a little while longer.
Okay. Sounds good.
So last but not least, fund balance. Obviously, I saved the two kind of meaty ones for the end. I'm not anticipating that we get this to consent agenda this meeting either, but I think you all were in the midst of having a conversation about what the district philosophy is around fund balance. And we talked a little bit in the last meeting about whether it is 5%, 1%, 2%, what does that really mean in terms of the purpose of a fund balance? One of the things that you did request was that we add in more of the traditional Kent current policy around defining fund balance. And so I rather than just calling them out and then defining them, we went straight into the definitions of what the different types of fund balance are. And then specifically going to the minimum fund balance policy for general fund. I think what we did as a district before was, and I think Director Strauss said this, did a nice job of defining under what circumstances would cause for some uncertainties in a district budget. It didn't go as far as saying these are the types of situations where using fund balance is appropriate. And I think that's some of where you talked about maybe going next, of under what conditions would we, or what circumstances are appropriate for a district to make the decision to spend fund balance, or, and then I think Director Daniels talked about, well, where do we put into place what we do to bring back fund balance? And you talked about it being a little bit, it's related, but is that policy work? Is that budget work? How much of that is codified in the policy? And so that's where we pick up tonight. And then there's the last but not least. I think what I heard you all say was that rather than a percentage, you wanted to go with days. So I took a leap, not thinking that this would be the last time, but represented the 13 to 15 days. That is approximately 2.5 to 3 working weeks of a school district's budget. What that means for us, and that was, I think, I picked that mostly because I think you all were talking about Puyallups language. So the second red portion at the bottom represents it in the language of days. The top portion represents it in the function of percentage. And they're fairly close. So for example, a 1-day expenditure for Kent School District, this current school year, is $1.4 million. In 2014, it was almost $1 million even. 1% was $2.7 million in 2014 and is $3.8 million currently. So there's a slight difference in that, but again, it goes back to the philosophy of what is a fund balance, and if it's designed to cover expenditures and operations for a district in case of an emergency, is it how many days or what percentage of emergency we'd like to cover? So that's just 2 examples of how it could be written.
I think also the previous statement explicitly states that we commit to something.
Yes, that's right.
Whereas we're saying it is the goal of the school district to maintain. I think that's a little bit of a difference.
No, this is the language. All I did was change the 3 to 5%.
So this is what I was wanting. So that statement as read talks about actual. It's the goal to maintain this on an actual every month basis. So a single month being the lowest month that we're below 3% could trigger and say, aha, we need a plan to get this back up. Focuses on the budget, and therefore if you perform the budget, then it will get you as expected. Where this, as stated, since you're only looking at actuals, something happens, revenue decline, property tax valuation goes down, whatever it is, it could, trip this plan clause to say, okay, you have to go get a plan. Well, that may be okay. I'm more interested in like the budget, or basically the way we operate towards the goal for the year, should be to keep something. And then, of course, I'm actually more interested in the days as opposed to the percent. Even though the percent's easier to understand, the days is more relevant to what the minimum fund balance is there to do. We plan on, let's say this goes into effect, this would be for 1920. The policy should apply as whatever budget you present for 1920 should meet this goal.
Have a number of days of protection in it to cover the cost of operation or something. And then to that end, the language then here would be updated slightly to say something like the budget that is adopted and presented would be, and if a budget is presented without or below the standard, then a plan is also presented that.
Right. And so this is, and I'll try to give my professional opinion of tying the minimum fund balance to the end goal, which is a sustainable budget. Just getting to a fund balance for fund balance sake really doesn't help you. Like, for example, when we got, extra money this year, we were way above our minimum fund balance for like a month. That doesn't really, mean anything, because what this is looking for is like, what is our projection of where we're going to be? We're looking at being able to always cover 13 days at a minimum. And then the goal is to cover 13 to 15.
So I had a question on that. And so if we are putting in previous year's actual general fund, should we consider it being current year's?
Well, that's also one thing, like, if it's related to budget, it would be 13 to 15 days of that budgeted year's operating expenses.
Right.
Which I guess be a future year.
So just for clarification, Ross, are you suggesting or saying that instead of, the way it reads now could be read that the fund balance has to be that on every month? And we know that there's times where when we're expecting revenue or where revenue's not there yet, that it could dip below, of changing the wording somehow so it says at the end of the year or something that the fund balance is that, rather than looking at it monthly?
I mean, I'd say it could go either way, but I think to recognize that, yeah, that the general fund budget, we're not necessarily focused on the smallest period. I don't know what that is,
right,
before March or right before October,
March,
right before
historically it's
election.
been March.
Yeah, say March is usually the lowest, that's not the goal, because the budget is the full operating year. That potentially would be the end year goal going into next year, knowing that, an individual month may go down because property tax collections are next month or something like that.
Right, and I agree with that. So could we add something that says the board recognizes that the fund balance fluctuates during the year due to revenue collections? And so then goes on to say that it's the end of the year fund balance that would, if the end of the year fund balance goes below the minimum amount, then a plan would be presented and reviewed annually until the funds are restored, or something along those lines.
Yes, it is possible to do that, if that's what you'd like to see.
Well, I'm just wondering if that, to me, that seems like that would, at least then we're recognizing that we know that it may do that.
So could I give an operational interpretation of that? So, for example, it is likely that this coming August, you will be presented with a budget that will not meet the 13 to 15 days. And so if this policy were adopted before then that means that when we submit that budget to you for adoption, and we would also submit a plan for how we intend to get to that 13 to 15 day amount as part of the budget adoption for the FY 20
To me, that's acceptable. Rather than forcing a budget to get to that, it would be, we can approve the budget as well as have a plan to get to the minimum fund days. That the budget, as it has to be more realistic of what we want to plan to spend, which, it includes contingencies, it includes hiring everybody, includes a lot of things that may not materialize, that if it doesn't reach this, that a plan would be separate to that as opposed to have to be forced into it.
Okay.
And then how do we want to monitor that? Keep up with the plan, I think that's
It says reviewed annually.
But
from a best practice, it could be quarterly of, let's have an update of where we're at. Actuals plus where we think we're gonna go.
yeah, that sounds good.
So I still don't think we're ready probably for third reading and approval, but I will say that the third reading will present these changes that you've said, and we'll reflect that in the next version. So that'll clean that up, and I thank you for your time. Our next session is on the 29th. And so what you will see will be, so let me back up a little bit. On May 22nd, at the regular meeting, you'll see policy 1400 and 1420 on the consent agenda. And then at the work session on the 29th, you'll see 3226 and 6022 for additional readings. And then we will start a new series of policies for first reading. And I will get those to you hopefully by the end of the week, so you can start your work and kind of a deep reading and review of those as well.
Dr. Harmon, will we also do the protocol at the 29th meeting as well?
Yes, I made a note that there will be space on the agenda for the protocol for 1420 during the 29th meeting. Thank you for the reminder, Director Strauss. And that's it for this session.
Thank you very much,
Thank you.
Dr. Harmon. So we will recess the work session for an executive session for approximately 30 minutes at 6:30 to discuss the qualifications of an applicant for public employment. Thank you for joining us.
I just muted it, so you're good. So when you come back on, you just hit mute, and it should come back.
Image and it'll come back.
Yeah.
Okay,
It's off
great.
now.
Okay, thanks.
I think she's gonna say she's coming back. Or maybe you turned her off.
I didn't touch anything yet.
Are they there? Is it happening now? Okay, we'll go sit.
Did you rerun them? Okay, thank you. So I made the changes.
Oh, I didn't see that.
Oh, it's,
I know.
I got it the right way.
Well, I had to add somebody.
And I had to add somebody too.
Yeah, so I added her,
Okay,
Kim. But I can fix that.
it's okay, it's okay, it's okay. I came in here and I couldn't get the thing to work, so. Give me 1 second.
No,
okay?
no.
I'm sorry.
No.
It's totally fine.
Last thing you need to deal with.
I
Okay.
made the changes, so I need to add David back in.
No, this
Is this?
should be the correct one. I'll just fix that real fast.
Okay.
Okay?
Or you can send it to me and I'll fix it. I have an hour until the next one. I don't want you to be here and be upset.
Okay.
It's totally okay. Okay. I have to come back down there anyway.
I'll do it. I'll bring it back.
Okay, I'm coming down there anyway. I'm so sorry.
No, it's not your fault.
doing today? Good. Good. How about you? I'm good.
do get a really good laugh out of them. This thing sends really funny stuff. It gives me a good giggle. But yes, they don't know how to cursive, so. They went into the band room, so this whole pack of books went into the band teaching. That is fun. Let's go.
How are you? Good. You should be able to enjoy the sunshine. Let me walk around the building a lap or two.
How's it going? It's good. Good. Maybe later when it's still light, I might get to, I don't know what time this ends tonight. It depends on the situation, but it was packed. But have people set lunch in the room, whether it comes out. Yeah, so that's like what they've been doing, but Dana sent out like a whole staff email for everyone to come, but she's not texting me right now, she said she couldn't come. But hopefully other staff will show up. We're ready for it to. Yes. Hopefully something. I really like us. You're ready to jump. I'll be, yeah, we'll see.
Good, how are you?
Hang in there. You gotta get close to retirement.
You got a little spring to your step.
Just a little. This knee is new, it's bionic.
Oh.
This one will be next month. Maybe I'll be able to do more than live out at the grocery store. So, must be getting close to looking at retirement.
Yeah, I'm starting.
Starting to think about it. That's tough. It's like, do you want to go away and then like have a little or kick it to the curb and go, okay, I'm doing that to the vegetables. So, I think so, 12 to 16. So you're arching I got to see the STEM night. Or Steve night, yeah, sorry. Yeah, it was nice.
We just popped 60s and 70s.
There you
Yeah,
go.
that's like the one thing of the year that I love doing.
Yeah.
Kindergarten with slime. And it's like the biggest hit.
I bet. Yeah. Yeah, yeah, I got to go look at some of the. Always told her to think about
It's going okay, I guess. Are you trying to give it like a fair? I'm gonna give it, a while and try to and then as I fill it in. Well, no, not switching it, but I added that as an option because nobody said they wanted Tuesday, so it might everyone. Oh, totally, that's why I put the limit, just like, I'll fill it as. So do we set it? Probably, although, like, I'm kind of surprised. Some of them say.
Much better.
Right. So we're gonna have to, we should brainstorm. So if we figure out some best ways to address, like you said, college, right? It's all like the way this is passed, license as an extension is
If there's a, if it's quietly say or one of these things, but this is always the good tradition.
Got one in the other.
Israel, your help for something. So I'm showing that Debbie's in a call. I've connected to her, but I'm not seeing her anywhere.
I don't think she has to, so that's good if she's connected.
Okay.
I think she'll she has to put herself on, she's in the call, but she has to put herself open.
Okay.
That means I think she's gonna be okay.
She couldn't see. She asked me to adjust the camera, so I did.
Good.
But I can't get her.
So,
seem to get her
Pam,
back,
I
and
can
I'm just
see-
worried I'm not going to be able to.
You might see if Maya or somebody has her text, because sometimes they text
Oh, okay,
back and forth.
okay,
Just
okay.
text her and say,
Thank you.
if everything's
Great
okay.
idea.
Yeah.
I'm not sure that I can see Debbie. I haven't turned the screen on, but on the computer I can't see her. Do you know her text?
Oh, yeah.
Okay,
We
thank
can.
you. Thanks, Issa.
Okay. Okay, so so should I just say?
Are you able to see the way you want to? She couldn't see you, Ross. And I'm not seeing that she's connected. I mean, I see she's on a call, but I'm not seeing her face. Thank you. Okay.
Oh, so she will turn on her video
Okay,
right before.
okay, it is better. Okay, good. Okay. I was worried she wasn't connected, but okay, thank you.
Sure.
She just wasn't turned on. Yes.
Yeah, that's right.
Thank you. You were right, and thanks.
I think they call it accept.
Okay, thank you. Oh, I hope so.
So I need to
Oh. I see you grabbed a comment.
Yeah, I want to because
Okay, and I'm gonna
actually,
go grab
why
some
don't you
of the rest.
take it? I just I'll write it down here. What her name is? She's going to lead us in the pledge.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
So start this call.
Okay, yep.
All right.
Thank you.
Yes, this, thank
Yep.
you.
And you saw I have the supplemental.
How you doing?
I have the supplemental. Okay, great. Okay. You don't. I haven't seen Christy at all. So I was going to be a teacher or something. So I think I'll be right Oh, yeah, I did.
Yeah, just a heads up, because Debbie's talking ahead. Maya's asked that we share the duties of motion and control.
Elizabeth. Have a pen in case you don't have one.
How are you?
There is nothing on the budget
Just
today.
hand them out to you. So far.
Yeah, no, it was really like weird, but
I don't know.
okay.
Testing, testing. Is that on? Just want to make sure it's for-
I'm sorry?
just want to make sure everyone knows we're getting the tape. Testing. Ladies and gentlemen, we have chairs coming in. If you would just move slightly so Mr. Vasily can come in and set up a few chairs, we appreciate it. You'll be seated comfortably in just a few moments. Thank you.
Just Sean. The mics are not working right now.
Oh, this mic is on that one?
All, none of them are at this moment.
All right, are they all? Let's see.
I can't believe this.
Light control.
Oh, because they're on mute, right?
I think so.
Okay. There we go. Can you hear anything? Yep, thank you.
Same flashlight starts going down the same. Knows it will.
We were having Elsie speak or lead us into it.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Username and nothing happened.
That's what I mixed up on. Is that what you did? That's what I did. That's what I did.
Oh dear. Happen to know how long Macbeth is going on? I don't know, but I can tell you the second one is So yeah. That's, I know they've tried in the past to do this at different times, so they
set? Okay. All right, good evening, everyone. If you could please take a seat. I'd like to call this meeting to order. And I have asked, Miss Elsie Unger to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. Please stand. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, I'd like to welcome all of you this evening. And this is a meeting of the Kent School District Board, which is held in public to comply with the Open Public Meetings Act. So I'd like to follow up with the process for audience participation tonight. The purpose of the board meetings is for the board to conduct its business in public. And during the meeting, the board will listen to but not respond to the comments of visitors. Those wishing to comment must complete a comment card and give it to the board secretary before the meeting begins or no later than agenda item 3.0 presentations. No cards will be accepted once the presentations have begun. Abusive public comments personally directed towards staff members will not be tolerated, and the president may interrupt or terminate an individual statement when it's too lengthy, obscene, or irrelevant, or if there are names or titles used are getting mentioned. When it's your turn to address the board, please state your name. You'll come to the podium to my right. Please state your name at the start of your testimony. Again, we are not responding to comments this evening because this is a meeting of the board. When it is your turn to address, yes, state your name, and then we will ask you to limit your remarks to 3 minutes. You will hear a timer when the 3 minutes are up, and this is really to accommodate all of those who wish to speak tonight. Visitors who have completed a comment card indicating a desire to speak to an agenda item will be called at that portion of the agenda item. So we would ask that you please stay on topic as well. Per board procedure, written material to provide board members with background information should be submitted to the superintendent's office at least 1 week in advance of the meeting. So with that said, I'd like to ask Dr. Watts if there are any changes to tonight's agenda, please.
Yes, thank you. President Vengadaslam, members of the board, Ms. Holly, please note that a supplemental personnel report has been added to the consent agenda this evening.
All right. So do we need to accept? Yes. So
Move that we accept the addition of the supplemental personnel report to the consent agenda for tonight.
all right. Is there a second?
Second?
Okay. Are there any discussions or questions? Hearing none, I would like to take for a vote. All those in favor, say aye and raise your right hand. Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say no and raise your right hand. Okay, motion passes. And I'd like to inform everybody that President Strauss is on Skype tonight. Vice President Strauss is on Skype tonight. All right. So we are going to start with our 2.0 recognition. And we'd like to start with Director Hardy reading our proclamation for Teacher Appreciation Week tonight.
Yes, whereas the role of the classroom teacher cannot be overemphasized, for they are the single most influential factor in a child's educational experience, and whereas our teachers are at their best when they hold students to high expectations, challenge them to think critically, push them to excel in the face of any obstacle, and guide their development toward becoming contributing citizens. And whereas, under the expert direction of our teachers, classrooms throughout the Kent School District are places where students have the opportunity to display creativity and imagination and develop a passion for learning that will last a lifetime. Whereas excellent teaching is a labor of love, and our dedicated professionals, often if not every day, use their own resources and work long hours to enhance and enrich the daily learning experiences of their students with innovative and individualized lessons. And whereas educators shape the future of our community and nation as they work each day to prepare our students to compete globally, and whereas educators shape the whereas the value of our talented, committed, tireless, and inspirational teachers is without measure. Now therefore be it resolved, the Kent School District Board of Directors hereby proclaims May 6th through 10th, 2019, Teacher Appreciation Week in the Kent School District and urges all citizens to pay tribute to our public school teachers.
So I'd like to invite all teachers and Christy Padilla in the audience to accept the proclamation, please. Thank you. Thank you, everybody. Next, we'd like to recognize the Asian Pacific American Heritage Month, and I'd like to read a brief statement before we do that. The Kent School District is committed to the success of every student, family, and staff in each of its schools. Learning and work environments are enriched and improved by the contributions, perspectives, and the very presence of diverse participants. To that end, we are recognizing Asian Pacific American Heritage Month with a proclamation. While we will not single out any one person or group of people to represent their entire race or culture to receive this proclamation, we do believe that it is important to take these opportunities for celebration and recognition as we work to create a learning environment that is respectful, welcoming, and inclusive of every student, for every student, family, and staff, and in which their diversity is valued and contributes to their successes. So Director DeBruller, please, if you could read our proclamation.
Yes. Whereas Congress passed a law in May 1990 to designate the month of May as Asian Pacific American Heritage Month, calling on the people of the United States, especially the educational community, to observe the month with appropriate ceremonies, programs, and activities. And whereas Asian and Pacific Islander Americans have distinguished themselves in the arts, literature, and sports, and have made contributions in science, medicine, and technology that enrich our nation. And whereas Asian and Pacific Islander Americans have lived and worked in Washington State for over 150 years and have contributed to the rich cultural heritage of this state. And whereas the diverse Asian Pacific Islander American population in Washington State numbers more than 674,000 and represents more than 11 Asian and 7 Pacific Island nations. And whereas Asian Pacific American Heritage Month provides an opportunity to educate the public on the role Asian and Pacific Islanders have played in American history. Now therefore be it resolved that the Board of Directors of the Kent School District joins Washington State Governor Jay Inslee in proclaiming the month of May as Asian Pacific American Heritage Month.
Thank you. All right, we will move on to our 2.03, our proclamation for National School Nurse Day, and we'd like to call Director Daniels to read the proclamation, please.
Whereas all students have a right to have their health needs safely met while in the school setting, and whereas children today face more complex and life-threatening health problems requiring care in school, and whereas school nurses are professional nurses that advance the well-being, academic success, and lifelong achievements of all students by providing a critical safety net for our nation's most fragile children, and whereas school nurses act as a liaison to the school community, parents, and healthcare providers on behalf of children's health, and whereas school nurses support the health and educational success of children and youth by developing and providing programs and leadership, and whereas school nurses understand the link between health and learning and are in a position to make a positive difference for children every day. Now therefore be it resolved that the Kent School District Board of Directors hereby proclaims May 8, 2019 National School Nurse Day in Kent School District and urges all citizens to join in this observance.
We would like to invite Randy Heath, Executive Director of Student and Family Support Services, to make a brief statement and call on District Lead Nurses Lindy Barron and Millie Nabaret and School Nurse Arlene McKee to accept the proclamation, please.
All right. I'd I'd like to thank you on behalf of the school nurses present here today for this recognition. I have had the opportunity this year to help support the work of school nurses in Kent. Through this experience, I have come to understand the knowledge that exists in this group, how much they care about the students and families they serve, and the dedication this group has to helping to ensure that medical conditions do not become barriers to learning for our children. I was able to have this experience this year because of an unfortunate event, the unexpected passing of our longtime coordinator of health services, Dr. Mary Newell. Mary's absence has been difficult this year. I personally have missed her strong advocacy for kids, her vast medical knowledge, and because she was a morning person and I was not, the smile that greeted me each morning as I came into my office, and she was always in this chipper mood, and I was not. The other thing I really miss is during football season, her strong advocacy for the Green Bay Packers and that cheese head she would wear in the morning. And so that's difficult. Because of Mary's strong contribution to the students, families, and staff of the Kent School District and the legacy that we will feel for years, we want to declare today as Dr. Mary Newell Nurse Day in the Kent School District.
Good evening. My name is Millie Navarrete, and I have been blessed to have worked with Mary Newell for the past 16 years. Where do I begin? And hopefully I get through this. To share with you who she was and her impact on this district, its employees, families, students, health techs, and our nurse group. Mary was not only our fearless leader, she was a published author, a Robert Wood Johnson Executive Fellow, was recognized in a national magazine as a national leader to learn from. She was recognized as a KSD Employee of the Year. She was instrumental in opening the school-based clinic that is located at Kent Phoenix Academy. She was a colleague, a mentor, a dog lover, an accomplished quilter, a mother, and a friend. One of her crowning achievements was completing her doctorate. You would not know of these accomplishments as Mary was also humble and passed these things off as no big deal. She has worked with many individuals and groups in the district, such as transportation, nutrition and food services, student services, family and students, gaining their trust and respect. She was known for her leadership ability and her knowledge of policy and procedure. She was passionate about nursing and advocating for the health cares of our students. She was an advocate for our nurse group. She was well respected by the Puget Sound Nurse Leaders Group. Her passing leaves behind some very huge shoes to fill. Her impact on this community will last in the hearts of many for years to come. She will be remembered not only for her leadership, but for her sense of humor, her compassion, gentleness, and grace. Mary, we miss you dearly, and you're always a thought away. Thank you.
My name is Lindy Barron, and I'm one of the nurses here in the Kent School District. I'm old, so I started before Mary did. But we would like to acknowledge that her two sons are here, Ian and Cameron, and if you could bring that up. Mary loved to quilt, and so Ian and Cameron have generously donated this quilt to us, and we did have one of our shop teachers from over at Kent Meridian, Matt Duray, make us a shadow box so that this can be displayed in the student services area. We did get a little plaque made at the bottom that says, crafted by Dr. Mary Newell, RN, Coordinator of Nursing Services, honored for her integrity, professionalism, and advocacy for children and nursing services.
Hello, my name is Arlene McKee, and I'm also a nurse in the Kent School District. The Kent School District nurses have felt the deep loss of our coworker, mentor, leader, advocate, and friend, Dr. Mary Newell. Mary worked tirelessly and selflessly to promote the health and well-being of the students in the Kent School District. She was a passionate advocate for medically fragile children and worked diligently to ensure that every child had an opportunity to learn and thrive in school. Mary promoted the profession of school nursing. She continually advocated for appropriate staffing to meet the ever-increasing needs of our district. She supported the nurses at the district level, providing guidance and mentorship. Her door was always open and her phone was always on for us. To honor Mary and promote her passion for school nursing, the Kent School District nurses will, this year, begin awarding an annual recognition in her name. The Dr. Mary Newell Nurse Recognition Award will recognize one Kent School District nurse annually who demonstrates outstanding professionalism, support, compassion, and advocacy for students as well as other school nurses. This award will be an annual recognition to honor the enduring impact that Mary made on the health and well-being of the Kent School District staff and students. Thank you.
We'd like to ask everyone to stay for photo if you're able to. Thank you. So we'll begin with photos for our Teacher Appreciation Week first.
Yeah, the National Board Certificate.
Oh. Okay, we do. Okay. Sounds good. Okay. 2.0 for recognition for National Board Certification of School Nurses Awards. My apologies.
All right, thank you. So this year I get the honor of recognizing a school nurse who accomplished their National Board Certification for Nursing. Currently, the qualifications to earn this honor is they need to be currently licensed as a registered nurse in the United States. They need to have attained a bachelor's degree or higher in nursing or health-related field or the equivalent in other countries, or current certification by National Board for Certification of School Nurses, and must be currently employed in school health services or school health-related services. And so this year, we have one of our nurses who earned this honor. Yukiko Miller has worked as a school nurse in the Kent School District for the past 3 years. She is currently a school nurse at Martin Sartoon and Jenkins Creek Elementary School. She has previously worked at Neely O'Brien and Kent Valley Early Learning Center as well. She enjoys assisting students and their families and educating students on skills for healthy living. So if I could have Yukiko come up here now, and we will recognize her for her accomplishment. Okay. All right, thank you.
All right, now we will go into photo opportunities. So for Teacher Appreciation Week, if we can ask our teachers here to join us. Followed by our, we'd love to have Mary Newell's friends and family, and then followed by you. Okay, how do I say? Yukiko. Yukiko, thank you. Right here. I didn't either, actually. We're having problems, right?
Yeah, it's not.
She's right here. But I don't know if she's.
you tell if she's on video?
No, she's not on video.
She was, I don't know why. If we double click on her, can we put her on video?
Well, that just shows that she's currently in the meeting.
So I can't get her. I don't know why she's not showing we had her earlier. She may, I mean, it says she's in a meeting, but. Can't get her. You can minimize it if you
Oh, it
need
shows
to.
up there.
Yeah, it does, unfortunately. I don't think this is working.
It's not working.
Looks like it's going on. A little here. Nothing from her?
Are we kicking that out?
Okay, we are up to our 3.0 presentations. We'll begin with 3.01, our board communications plan review, number 3. And as you may recall, we have agreed to have 4 such presentations in front of the regular board meeting. So Melissa Laramie, Director of Communications and Public Affairs, will present and be available to answer questions for the board. Thank you.
Good evening, President Vengadaslam, members of the board, Dr. Watts and Ms. Holly. I am excited to be here tonight. I'm pleased to share with you the 3rd review of the Board Superintendent Governance Team's communication plan for the 18-19 school year. The purpose of the KSD Board Communications Plan is to present a clear and concise framework for communicating with our school community. As we've worked together on this for the last 8 months through work sessions, I appreciate the opportunity to participate and facilitate in the development and execution of your first board communications plan, and the opportunity to also present quarterly on the updates on progress and the remaining work that we have this school year. As a reminder, there are 4 main components to your communications plan that we have been working through, including identifying your audiences, determining your communication strategies, defining the most effective methods of communication to achieve your communication goals, and choosing roles and responsibilities, then selecting data, tools, and means for assessing the effectiveness of your communication efforts. So this evening, we'll take a look back. In our second report in January, we reviewed progress of the plan through December. This evening, we'll look back at the BSGT communications work in January, February, and March, and look ahead to the work that remains through the rest of this school year. So, looking back, you continued offering opportunities for two-way communication through face-to-face meetings at local libraries. There were 6 opportunities offered in January and February, and while, as we discussed, attendance was not as high as we had hoped for, one new location was offered, including at a senior center. Also, the second of 3 videos, as outlined in your communications plan, was released in March, and that video was to inform the public of the board's roles and responsibilities. The videos are released in the board newsletter as well as on social media, and then included on the website. After exploring a number of options and considering the budget implications of those options, at the beginning of the year, you approved a low-cost option for live streaming of all board work sessions and board meetings. And we continue to review the data of how the live streaming of these board work sessions and regular meetings perform at our monthly meetings. And while the process is not perfect, there are no overtime costs with this option. And we do have a backup copy, and we are able to restore and post those if necessary. And we continue to seek ways to improve the process without causing any financial burdens to the district. And of course, as part of the communications plan, we are staying committed to being both data informed and looking at all information and considering each decision through an equity lens. At our last work session, we took time to consider the number of voices within our district and how we can better reach all those we serve. From the classroom to the 7 municipalities within our district boundaries, part of the beauty of our district is our rich diversity. And we talked about this by looking at beads at our last work session together. And we talked about how might we as a district and you as a board ensure that we are hearing from and seeking out all of the voices that make up the fabric of our community, and not just those that have the means, ability, and awareness to make their voices heard. So looking ahead, moving forward, there are 3 upcoming opportunities this week, in fact, for board members to engage in pairs with staff and community at the community conversations at the Kentwood Library, the Kent Lake Library tomorrow, the 9th, yes, and on Saturday at the Fairwood Public Library. And the final board video is also debuting this month. And this will complete the video series we've outlined in the communications plan, again, to inform the public of the board's roles and responsibilities. This video focuses on the role of the board. At the last regular board meeting, with the approval of Thought Exchange, we are working now to identify training dates for how to use that tool, and then we will focus on implementing it, and specifically on working with you on identifying appropriate questions and the timing of those questions to engage the community in fruitful conversations to gain insights the board can carefully consider in future decision-making as outlined in your communication goals. Additionally, a survey will be included in your June newsletter seeking community and staff input on your progress towards your 2018-19 communication goals. And that will be how you end the school year with your newsletters. With that, I'm pleased to consider any feedback or answer any questions at this time.
I don't have any questions, so maybe if there's feedback or discussion, I might chime in, but that's it.
I don't have any questions either, but I want to thank you for all of the work that you've done on this, Melissa. I know it's been a little bit challenging, and so I appreciate your effort and your outside-the-box thinking to help us to do this, so I appreciate you.
Thank you.
For sure. I was, with the upcoming community conversations, I was going through some of the questions from the last ones, and I noticed there was one there that said there was an answer coming, and it didn't get updated, so, and that's the only one that I saw, but,
Okay.
and I can't remember what the question was now, but it just struck me today that probably needs to be updated, so I don't know what the process is for going back once the questions have been answered, if there's information not fully given, what's the timeline for getting that information back out there.
Mhm.
So just a wondering.
Yeah, so we identified at our last work session that on or around May 20th, we'll post any responses that you're not able to answer tomorrow night or Saturday. You'll get the questions to us, and we'll work as an executive cabinet to answer those questions and get them posted on or around the 20th of May. And then if we're not able to, generally we go back. So I'll go and take a look. I'm not sure what that is. Thank you for bringing that to my attention. I wasn't aware, but I'll take a look at that and we can get that up and posted.
Thanks, Melissa.
Sure.
So this is I guess, a question to the board as well, maybe to Austin too, because I'm going to think way back to when we started the community conversations, right? Just board, nobody else, 2 at a time, so it wasn't an official meeting, and a lot of attendance, a lot of conversation up front, right? This is around RIFs, this is talk, this is around budget talk, and so we had a lot of good input from the community, and I've joined every one I've gone to, but let's say I've linked the last one maybe 4 or 5 people there, which is good because new people came, but I'm interested in doing something to shake it up. So thoughts I had, which is also why I'm looking at you right now, is doing it at a school during school hours, meaning for high school students, something like that. Something that now that we have a captive audience, but basically we can get people to say things where they wouldn't normally have to give up an activity or give up an evening or find a babysitter in order to come talk to us. And so we can kind of get where people are. There's a lot of people we haven't heard from that show up here. They talk to us, but they can't really talk with us. And so I want to do more community conversations, but figure out a way, and we can brainstorm this. We can even take input, send me an email, how we can get more people to voluntarily show up, changing time, changing location, changing format, whatever that is.
Yeah. Okay. I'll be quiet. Let you finish. Debbie? Not online?
Oh, sorry, I am here. I don't know what happened. I guess my video's gone now. But I just wanted to also express my appreciation for Melissa. I know that it's been a long process, and I do appreciate everything that she has done to help us through this. I think this has been a really good thing for our board. We haven't attempted this in the past, so I'm also thankful for the rest of the board for undertaking this as well. So thank you.
Thanks.
All right. Going back to Ross's questions. So do we have, Melissa, you mentioned a survey. So is that something we can put out, that how can we best reach or interact with our students? I mean, that can be part of that survey. Because I'm not quite sure how else we would get, I mean, other than through Austin.
I
Do you
mean,
have thoughts?
I mean, so my immediate thought is if you want to have a community conversation during the school day, my only immediate reaction is it would have to be during lunch.
Right.
Because the way classes are structured and everything, there are early release Wednesdays where you could come, you would be basically around lunchtime, although the only, I guess, say disadvantage of doing it on a Wednesday then is that students aren't required to be at the school after school day is done. There's some students who stay around for lunch, but a lot don't. But that being said, I think having conversations during lunch would be a very open, interesting idea. My only concern, though, is reaching all students, because right now, if us as a board, and we're trying to reach out to 3 community conversations right now, however you can 3 in a week, however you consider that there are 4 high schools plus 3 academies, that's 7. So that would involve a multi-week process. It would involve minimum of 2 board members being there, and I know that based on just how different students come in during different lunches and everything, they might prefer to have at least 2 board members in addition to me or whatever student representative will be there for the semester. I think another thing to consider, though, is the actual student representative, and that is if they're in school, how are they going to supposed to get to all 7 of those community conversations when they need to be, when there might be in the middle of class that doesn't coincide with lunch? So I think those are just things to think about, but yeah, so those are my immediate thoughts, so.
I don't know that student reps would have to be at every one. I think
Mhm.
it would just be, but
Yeah,
so
I
there's
mean,
a lot of, I will say that when we're promoting things in the district with students, people come and have tables during lunch, and it's a very popular time for
Mhm.
kids to come and chat. So I think that'd be a great idea. And it could be like a once a month thing. It's not something that would have to be every school every month, you know, or we could just do like, we could just spread it out over, and just do maybe like, but I think that's a fantastic idea. I think it's great. Yeah.
And I just want to thank you for being flexible, because I know we've shuffled around policy and communications. So thank you for that. And also would like to kind of understand on the survey, I know we say it's communication on the communication plan, but there are so many other things that are part of communication that I'm wondering if we can combine them into that survey. So if we can have a discussion on the questions, that'd be great.
Yes, so you'll have an opportunity to, as part of the regular draft process that we do each month, to submit your changes through that process. And I think to allow enough time, we'll do it over 2 months through May and June to allow enough time.
Okay, so just to be clear, covering all 4 of our board goals.
Yes.
Not just communication.
Correct. Thank you.
Thank you so much. All right, we will now move on to 4.01, our RFP for independent auditor services update, and Dr. Harmon will present an update on the RFP.
So at the April 24th regular board meeting, you as a board directed the announcement of a new RFP that went out on April 29th. Seattle Times, Tacoma Times Tribune, and Seattle Daily Journal are the 3 locations where that is currently posted. To date, I've received no questions or responses. Reached out to those who'd inquired under the previous RFP number and made sure that they received a copy and were aware that the announcement is out there. And as a reminder, the deadline for submissions is 4 p.m. on Tuesday, the 21st. And that is in time to have an update and have those proposals ready for presentation on the 22nd's Wednesday board meeting. So. If there's any questions, that's the update I have.
Thank you, Dr. Harmon. Okay, moving on to 5.01. Is our 5th reading and approval of Policy 1610, Conflicts of Interest Board and Superintendent. I'd like to ask a board member to make a motion to move 5.01, please.
I move that we approve Policy 1610, Conflicts of Interest Board and Superintendent.
Is there a second?
Second.
All right, a motion has been made and seconded to approve 5.01, 5th reading and approval of Policy 1610. Are there any discussions or questions?
Just clarifying questions, because this is 5th reading, meaning it's gone through multiple things. So end to end, we renumbered the policy to be consistent. For a reason you told me that was important, but I forget.
To consistent with WASDA numbering. So if we follow WASDA model policy, I guess there was a point in time where we'd created space as a district for this type of policy, and then WASDA did some renumbering, and as part of the update, we want to make space, because if they create a policy under our previous numbering system, we would then have to renumber again. So it's just, since we're doing an update, let's clean up the numbering and align with WASDA.
Yeah, this contains all the appropriate references to the RCWs that are
Yes,
applicable.
all of those things are updated as well.
That was it, just clarifying questions, thank you.
Okay. Debbie, do you have any questions or concerns?
No, I do not.
Okay, I do have some comments. I just want to say that I will be voting no on this. primarily because and this is a democracy, so I disagree with spouses of employees being hired. I'm sorry, spouses of board directors being hired. And I think fundamentally I agree with the Section A and Section C, Section A and Section D, but I have a disagreement with Section B and C, particularly where it says that board directors could be employed. And so I wasn't clear what that discussion entailed because I didn't see the notes on that, but I do have a disagreement over that, but I understand that this has been discussed to death, but I just wanted to justify why I wouldn't be approving this tonight. Okay, so with that said, I'd like to call for a vote. All those in favor say aye and raise your right hand.
Aye.
All those opposed say no and raise your right hand. No. Okay, motion passes. We are down to 5.02, Instructional Materials Committee textbook adoptions. And I'd like to ask a board member to make a motion to approve 5.02.
Do you have any comments? I just want to make sure.
Yes, we do have a comment from Kathy Jones. If you'd like to speak, please.
My name is Kathy Jones. I'm a resident and teacher here in Kent. I would like to speak to the process and selection of the primary and intermediate math, and it's comment as much about the process and selection as the program itself. I have some concerns. I just found out this was being presented tonight, so I didn't really have time to prepare anything, so I'm just speaking from bullet points, so I hope it makes a little bit of sense. Some of the issues I have as teachers, parents, community members were widely unaware of this new curriculum process and that they were selecting a new program. It's called Ready Math, but it is iReady. It is connected to a highly unpopular testing process and company. I went to the presentation about it, and it seems that this program has a capability to have all work done by students on laptops at school and at home. It will modify, access, record data, and grade. Teachers could be reduced to monitors watching students online. It's oddly connected to the time of the one-on-one rollout. I hope this is not correct, but this type of process and finding out this information in this manner does not make us feel that there's open communication and that there's any trust in what's going on. So this is completely opposite to what you say you're doing. A number of teachers had 2 to 3 weeks to select this program. It was while they were working, so I think they had very little time to make a good decision. This is not enough time to make a selection. It is a new program. It has not been proven elsewhere. It was not piloted in Kent. We do need a new math program, but this is not the way to do it. This is a big, important, expensive decision, and this is the time to investigate and make a wise decision. Kent has a history of making hasty adoptions. They've been disasters. The programs have been unpopular. They have been unused. They've wasted class time. Material still in their packages is surplus because it's not used. This is not a time for a three-peat with a math curriculum. And I would like to share a bit of my personal story, and please be patient, there is a point. My son spent 13 years in Kent. He went to Pine Tree, Sequoia, Kent Meridian, and Kentwood. He went to high school for math. He had the opportunity to do Running Start. Kent prepared my son to have 2 degrees, one from an Ivy League college, by the age of 22. He had a job before he graduated. The company wanted him so badly they let him choose his position wherever he wanted to go in the United States. He had a job before he graduated. So yes, I would say Kent prepared him well. They prepared him successfully for his future. But now I'm afraid I'm going to be in a position to recommend to him to move and not have his kids in school.
Ms.
And it breaks-
Jones, I'm sorry, we
Well,
have limited.
It breaks my
to 3
heart,
minutes.
but his goal has been to come back to Kent, and he's loved Kent. So my message to the board is you are not here to serve an individual and their agenda. You are elected to represent the Kent residents and to serve its students and schools. What you do tonight and in the next few months will determine how you will be remembered.
Thank you,
You have a
Ms.
chance now to choose your legacy, and then you get to live with it.
Thank you. Right, I'd like to ask a board member to make a motion to discuss 5.02.
Move that we approve the resource adoptions, entirety of 5.02 instructional materials committee textbook adoptions.
All right, is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, motion has been made and seconded to approve instructional materials committee textbooks adoptions. Are there any discussions or questions?
There's questions about, because there's multiple things in here and they don't seem to be gone through multiple committees. So just clarify which groups reviewed which curriculum that we're approving, because there's the K-5 math curriculum, then there's some CTE curriculum, and then a science 8th grade test. Just clarify which groups and who's involved in reviewing each of those.
Sure. So the K-5 Math Curriculum Review Committee was a group of teachers, administrators. Marcy, you want to speak to who else we might have had on that committee for the review process?
We had some special populations specialists in the area of ELL, as well as instructional support in inclusive education.
Just to be clear, existing staff members of the Kent School District.
Yes. And so that was the sort of first phase of the review process. The second phase, we actually held open community-based previews of all the curriculum that was put up for review. So I think we had 3 different materials or curriculum materials that we were reviewing at that time. So we had 2 after-hour sessions that was open to the community and the public, and they were able to weigh in and provide comments and feedback. And that was just for the review process. And that information was aggregated, then submitted to our instructional materials committee for review. And that committee was made up of a group of diverse stakeholders that represented elementary, secondary, teachers, libraries, technicians. We also had central office staff that was a member of that group, and they made the recommendation and approved the Ready Math curriculum for adoption.
And when did that begin? When did that process begin?
When did which part?
So
the full process? That goes back to.
So the full process goes back to last late spring and looking through the options that are out there. Yes, thank you. Looking through options that are out there and gathering a list to the first phase of narrowing through the ed reports criteria and rating scales that.
In spring of like 2018.
Yes.
A year ago.
Yes, yeah. Thank you. Through a smaller team that was able to focus on our special population needs for students that we need to focus differentiation for, and so reducing that to a list of 3 that our larger committee then began and reviewed beginning on March 9th and through to April 3rd. That larger committee reviewed and narrowed down to their recommendation of Ready Classroom.
And before you go to the CTA, they basically had how long was how old is the current curriculum? Let's put it that way.
It is from 2008, but prior to our current standards.
Okay, and then this curriculum, how long are we expected to use this before we might look for it again?
6-year adoption.
It's recommended for a 6-year adoption cycle.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Which aligns to our board policy and district procedures.
That was one question on that. And if you, with the same thing with the CTE funding in the science 8th grade, was that a different committee that looked at that, same committee?
So for it's the same committee. The Instructional Materials Committee reviews all curricular materials and resources and make recommendations from there. For one thing that's a little bit different with the Instructional Materials Committee and with our secondary schools, high schools in particular, we do have another sort of layer, which is High School Instructional Council, which you'll see some of those course recommendations come up a little bit later. So typically, the High School Instructional Council meets first, and if there are any course changes or adoptions that require updating our curricular resources, then it goes to the Instructional Materials Committee for approval.
Thank you, that was all my question.
What did the committee see as the benefits of Ready Math?
Do you want to speak to that? So a couple of things. One, this is aligned, I think the biggest priority is that it's aligned to the current standards. So the methods in which our students are assessed, it aligns to the standards that we're currently teaching, and it ensures a better alignment with our assessment and the rigor and demand that we're expecting for our students. Another feature that was found favorably was the online and home-based resources that would be available not just for students but for families as well to continue to support what math instruction looks like. And although it comes with the lessons that allow students to kind of navigate and work through on their own, it still requires a teacher to deliver instruction and to monitor and support students as they navigate the curriculum.
I know I had a long talk with Talisa about this, and she was giving me some data that shows that students were actually doing quite well in math using the Ready Math as compared to what we already have, which is pre-standards. So I thought that was interesting.
So just to clarify with that piece, some schools may have purchased on their own the Ready Math lessons, and that they're using those, which is separate from what this curriculum review and adoption process was. Okay. Did you want to add something?
One of the biggest pieces of standout of strength was that ability for differentiation and the supports explicitly written into the written print materials that allows a teacher to differentiate in all levels for students.
Yeah, and I know how hard that is to do without having that support. I think that's it for right now.
Yes, I think my questions have been answered. I was wondering about our instructional materials committee. I thought I read that that group is going to be updated, because I remember the board was appointing that many years ago.
Yes.
Did I read that
No, you're 100% correct. We did reach out. We built our schedule for the Instructional Materials Committee and High School Instructional Council meetings in the fall. And in our first Instructional Materials Committee meeting, we didn't have any new curriculum that needed to be presented or reviewed. So our first meeting was in the spring, and at that time, we had resources available, and we did reach out to request parent recommendations from the board to participate in that process.
You didn't respond, sounds like. Okay. Yeah, usually it's a formal process. I know that it comes to the board and then we write it up, and so. Okay, all right, thank you.
May I ask one question?
Sorry, go ahead, Debbie.
Yeah, I just wanted to confirm that these were planned budgeted expenses.
Yes, so prior to my joining KSD, the curriculum adoption, if we wanted to follow our review cycle that's outlined in our policy, we were actually, I think we were about maybe 3 years kind of behind at that point. And last year, they started the process with the assumption, if, budget allowed, we'd be able to move forward with the adoption, but that was put on hold. So, yes, there's quite a large portion of budget that set aside this year to cover the costs for professional development for our teachers to ensure everyone will have access to training prior to the school year starting.
Thank you. That answered my other question as well. So thank you.
Where are we on the echo? I don't know. Does this program, the Ready Classroom, come with the ability to analyze, like on formative assessments, analyze what student needs to work on more so that the teacher doesn't have to pour through it and figure it out? It brings it right up?
Yes, that functionality is available.
Okay. Mm-hmm. And we're getting that?
Yes.
Other questions? All right, hearing no other questions, I'd like to call for a vote. All those in favor say aye and raise your right hand.
Aye. Aye.
All those opposed say no and raise your right hand. Motion passes. All right, we are up to 5.03, technology levy purchase, and we have Matt Parrish speaking to 5.03.
Good evening, Board. I'm Matthew Parrish from Covington, Washington. I'd like to urge you to not approve the technology levy investments on the agenda tonight unless it's done fair and equitably for the entire district. I speak from experience because of the laptop that my daughter got at Matson, which as an IT manager myself, I wouldn't give anybody. I'm wondering if this is a good use of taxpayer dollars, and do we really want or need these children staring at computer screens for most of the day? Because I don't. They need to be reading from books. They need to be learning penmanship, social skills, conflict resolution, math on paper, not on a laptop preparing for testing, and hands-on science, not immersed in computers. It's ironic because I work in IT for a living, and I don't want these kids staring at computer screens in the name of personalized learning, AKA standardized test prep equaling money. This also has me frustrated because high school is getting refreshes too, which means middle school gets sloppy seconds. After the cleaning job I had to do on my daughter's laptop in October, I nearly swore off KSD's one-to-one laptop program. Her laptop case was broken. It still is. The school won't replace it. In fact, they keep lecturing me about insurance. The case reeked of cigarette smoke. My daughter and I both have asthma, so we can't have that in the house. And it had stains from only God knows what. And it looked like the mattress from a pay-by-the-hour motel. 2 hours of scrubbing and soaking and drying over a weekend got the case cleaned up. And on the filthy laptop itself. She still has issues with the laptop that I've tried to fix but can't. In fact, I get lectured about the insurance. And we're still fighting with it. In fact, this morning, the laptop failed again. KSD Tech Support isn't exactly on it with these, and it's only telling her they're only telling her to not let me touch it and help her. In fact, I don't let the computer on my network. She's not able to use it at home. The money for these laptops could be better spent if it's done equitably and spent where it really matters, which is for all students, including students at iGrad who still do not have the laptops they need.
Okay, I would like to ask for a motion to approve 5.03 technology levy purchase, elementary one-to-one completion.
I move that we approve 5.03, technology levy purchase, elementary one-to-one completion.
All right, is there a second?
A second.
All right, are there a motion has been made and seconded to approve 5.03 technology levy purchase. Are there any discussions or questions? Debbie?
No, I'm good, thank you.
All right, then I would like to call for a vote. All those in favor say aye and raise your right hand.
Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say no and raise your right hand. All right, motion passes. We're up to 5.04, technology levy purchase refresh for Mill Creek Middle School. I'd like to ask a board member to make a motion to approve 5.04, please.
I move to approve 5.04, the technology levy purchase refresh for Mill Creek Middle School.
Okay, is there a second?
I'll second.
All right, any discussions or questions?
Question with this one, just so the refresh is just for a single school. Can we talk about the refresh process? How it's identified both for this school and then any kind of refresh plan for other middle schools?
So the reason that we are focusing on Mill Creek this year, because other schools were refreshed in the more recent future, in the previous year.
And so, say, Mill Creek is at the end, are they at the end of the refresh cycle, or the middle, where are we at?
Yeah, based on our entry method, Mill Creek was at the end of the cycle, so now they've circled up to the beginning, which is the same way that we do for the rest of the schools.
Okay. That was it, thank you.
Okay.
Okay. Anyone else? Debbie?
I'm good.
All right. No more discussions or questions. I'd like to call for a vote. All those in favor say aye and raise your right hand.
Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say no and raise your right hand. Motion passes. And 5.05, our technology levy purchase refresh for high schools. I'd like to ask a board member to make a motion, please.
Move to approve 5.05, technology levy purchase refresh for high schools.
All right, is there a second?
Second.
Okay. Director Daniel seconded. Are there any discussions or questions?
Question here, no specific schools are named. Can we talk about do you know the 1865, where they're at, what schools are kind of in this population?
Yes, we do. I can give you a detailed list a little bit later, but we know exactly where those are going. They're replacing our oldest, our 5th year and older laptops that happen to be at some of the schools.
So is this any old laptop across any of the schools? High school specifically in this case?
High school specifically in this case, yes.
Okay.
What happens to the old laptops?
So we compile them. We the ones that are the oldest and unusable. We surplus them. So we end up surplusing them all, and we've been kind of going over a couple of different options for how do we get them back into the community and such.
Okay, and yeah, I know we've gotten in the past back into the community, and I was just wondering if we did the same thing.
Yeah, we're talking about refreshing a couple of different programs, but we wanted to make sure that those programs could serve all of our students and all of our community before we went forward with it.
Good, thank you.
All right. Are there any other discussions or questions? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye and raise your right hand. Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say no and raise your right hand. And motion passes. 5.06, change order approval for Zeus Creek Elementary Multipurpose Room additional rebid project. Is there a motion, please?
I move to approve 5.06, the change order approval of the Zeus Creek Elementary Multipurpose Room addition rebid project.
All right. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, motion has been made and seconded to approve change order approval, Zeus Creek Elementary Multipurpose Room. I'd like to ask for any discussions or questions.
No questions. I mean, the things here, so that we've got plenty, not plenty, say 30% using of the undistributed costs, so have a balance remaining on undistributed costs for any future change orders as this progresses. So just my comment, no questions.
Okay. All right. Anyone else? Questions, comments? No.
And I was looking at the credit to delete the wood fence requirement. I wasn't aware that we required wooden fences around for schools, or?
Fred, thank you.
As part of the
permit process with the city of Kent, you have to provide a oblique barrier between the school and residential services. When the architect put the drawings together, he didn't realize that the pyramidalis trees on the neighbor's property went the full distance of the fence. So when we got out there and we started looking at it, the contractor says, why am I going to take the fence out and put a wood fence in? You have a barrier with the neighbors. So we deleted the fence.
And the arborvitae are already there.
Yes, and they're the neighbors.
Great.
So.
Okay. Thanks, Fred.
So I just would like to ask for if we can get a report on the change orders so far and all the multipurpose room projects that have started. I know that Pine Tree, I think, is still waiting for their
Pine
cafeteria.
Tree and Fairwood are going out to, or advertised to bid, I think, next week.
Next week. Okay, great. Thank
So
you for
there's
the update.
probably 30 days of bid time, and then we'll be bringing those to the board for approval.
Okay, and
of
the
the
change
contract.
orders, if we can get kind of an update on
We
all
can
the
get
ones
you
that
an
have come
update on the 4 that are either 2 completed and 2 in process.
Okay, all right. Sounds good. Thank you. Thank you, Fresh. Yes, multipurpose. All right, so I'd like to call for a vote. All those in favor, say aye and raise your right hand. Aye. All those opposed, say no and raise your right hand. All right, motion passes. 5.07, recommendation to surplus McMillan Assemblage, property south of Mill Creek Middle. I'd like to ask a board member to make a motion, please.
I move that we approve Agenda Item 5.07, recommendation to surplus McMillan Assemblage property south of Mill Creek Middle.
All right, is there a second?
Second.
Okay, Director Hardy got it first? Yeah. Okay, so a motion has been made and seconded to approve 5.07. Are there any discussions or questions?
The question I had kind of when this first came up, so I understand the backstory, which is helpful about why we would want to do this, if Kent wants to use it. I just want to be clear on the process to determine that it was not needed for future school needs, either capital needs or anything like that, that we don't need this for sure, even though the city of Kent wants it.
That's correct.
Think about that process and how we determine it.
Well, we purchased these. There was a number of homes there before, and we purchased those. We demolished those because at that time there was a thought of maybe we needed to make a soccer field out there because of the condition of the football field. But since then, the board has approved restoration of that football field as part of the 2016 bond issue. And the school felt, and the athletic department felt that we really didn't need any additional fields at that school. And then when we were approached by the city of Kent and by the neighboring business owner, we felt, well, the city wanted to buy it because they have to have it for their storm drainage. And so that's why we're coming to the board with the recommendation.
Okay, and the map is very helpful to kind of see where it is in relation to the school building. And right, that might have been used for soccer field, but we've already approved, I think you said we've already approved the
rebuilding of the existing football field.
Okay, fantastic, thank you.
And it is a headache for the district because there's a lot of homeless people, a lot of garbage and debris that gets left there, needles, that kind of thing that we have to keep cleaning up.
Okay, thank you.
Are there any questions, additional questions?
I had one. So, Fred, could you speak just a little bit? I know this is the first step when we declare it surplus, about what the next steps are on this property, please.
Okay, the next step is the next board meeting, we will bring the resolution for your approval to surplus it. And then we have to advertise for 2 weeks for a public hearing, which will be the following board meeting. And at that time, the board will determine they want to sell the property. Once they approve the sale of the property, there's a 45-day waiting period before we can actually sign a purchase and sale agreement and actually sell the property. And these are all controlled by RCW.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Long.
Thank
you. All right. We are up for a vote. All those in favor, say aye and raise your right hand. Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, say no and raise your right hand. Right, motion passes. Up to 6.0, consent agenda. All right, are there any board members who'd like to pull an agenda item for discussion? All right, hearing none.
Can I pull 6.9?
6.9, all right.
Someone have to make a motion though, but.
6.9.
Pull 6.9.
New courses.
New courses?
Yeah.
Yep.
CTE. All right. All right, we need a motion minus 6.09, please, for approval.
Move that we approve the consent agenda minus 6.09.
All right, is there a second?
I'll second.
Motion has been made and seconded to approve the consent agenda minus 6.09. Are there any other discussions or questions?
Not with consent.
Okay. So all those in favor of approving consent agenda minus 6.09, say aye and raise your right hand.
Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say no and raise your right hand. Right, motion passes. We're down to 6.09. Go ahead.
So I'm totally in favor of adding new courses. My only slight concern, though, is there's 2 courses on here, and they're both approved for Kent Lake. But what about students at, let's say, Kent Meridian who want to take Principles of Biomedical Science? Is that just not an opportunity for them? I'm just concerned that students from in this case, more than like 6,000 students from other high schools won't have the opportunity to take these classes.
Sure. So when we do course proposals, they come from individual schools usually, because those are courses that are the students have wanted offered in their particular buildings. That doesn't preclude the other schools from coming back to the table and saying we would also like to offer that program in our school. Given CTE, that's a coordination with our CTE director and the principal in order to bring that recommendation to the committee, and then we add that this course to the the catalog for that particular school.
Got it. So I'm just like following up. So once in this case Kent Lake goes out and says our students have signed up for this course, we want it, this and this and this. Does Kent Lake then tell others? Does like the Kent Lake instructional council or whatever then tell other schools, hey, here's a class we're adding at this school, so that other schools know like this is something that's going on?
As a committee, once we've approved a course, it goes out to all administrators that these courses have been approved for these schools as an update to them about what's been approved by the high school instructional council.
All right, thank you. Yep. Like to have a motion for approve 6.09?
Move that we approve 6.09 from the consent agenda.
Okay, is there a second?
I will second.
So a motion has been made and approved. Motion has been made and seconded to approve the 6.09. And so I'd like to call for a vote. All those in favor say aye and raise your right hand.
Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say no and raise your right hand. Okay, motion passes. Now we are at 7.0 communications, and we will start with the student representative report.
Yes, so I'm excited for my report today. I guess we'll start off by saying I had the opportunity today to meet with Student Leadership Advisory for the meeting for month of May. It was a small group of less than 10 students, small but mighty, but we really, I really liked today's conversation because we got to really focus on the past year, and instead of focusing on, I guess, like, things that we want to improve across the district, we had the opportunity to talk about the process itself and talk about how can we specifically improve Student Leadership Advisory. There's a lot of conversation about different types of meetings, different lengths, different overall qualities we want to see on how the issues students will work with when they're getting in there. So it's not just an advisory kind of committee. And that way, when we have like an equity activity earlier in the year, and we talk about multiculturalism, or we talk about equity, or we talk about changes we want to see regarding discipline. That way, just without going into too much details, we can kind of divide the work up among different students, and that way it'll really kind of, and we'll start at the very beginning of the year. And we'll start it, and we'll kind of divide it by each month, and kind of really restructure things. That being said, the application window to join Student Leadership Advisory for next year opens this Friday, May 10th. Really excited about this because as we restructure next year, and we talk about how we want students to join, I'm really passionate about this because instead of just having a principals nominate students, now there's principals, assistant principals, athletic directors, advisors, and coaches who will all receive this application. So instead of just having students that even a building principal may just know, instead we're going to this is going to be sent to many, many different staff members within the schools. So that way we can focus on the goal of getting students who want to come to this, who might not just automatically be considered leaders by everyone in the school, or students who would be the automatic people that you would think of, such as ASB presidents. I'm really excited about that, and I want to just put out there that if you are a current sophomore or junior, you have the maybe go talk to your assistant principal, athletic director, advisor, counselor, whoever, staff member, and see if what the process is, and maybe see if you'll get nominated. And on the another interesting thing is on the actual application itself, there will be a little question that asks, how did you hear about this? So I'm really passionate about, I really like this because then we will be able to see who in the buildings really can connect with the students, who in the building will be able to really recommend students, and not just one building principal for an entire high school of more than 2,000 students. The application window will close on June 3rd. And then after that, we will have all the new students who will come to the final June meeting of SLA. And so we will have this year's students and next year's students, and we're really excited about that, so that way we can not just mingle together, but really kind of focus on transitioning over the next year. And this will also be an opportunity for me to advertise the position of student representative for the board. The student representative on the board will then, the application will then open in June. So I'm really excited about this work, and I'm really thankful to the other students I've had the opportunity to serve this year. The variety of conversations among the seniors and juniors has been really, really wonderful. And I know from members in Central Admin that a lot of the recommendations we have made have already been incorporated into conversations they've had, into their meetings that they have, and kind of the different focuses that we had around equity and discipline and items like that through exercises we had during the earlier of the year. I want to also report that please go see Into the Woods, which is currently premiering at Kentridge. It's such a great show. I went and saw it. Please go support the arts at Kentridge. I'm also looking forward to my first and my only community conversations. So I will be with the rest of the board tomorrow and on Saturday. So please come join us. I also want to congratulate students who are going to everywhere they may choose to go, college, military, wherever you may go. I learned as of yesterday that we have a student from May High School who's going to MIT. We have a lot of students who are, I know from Kentwood and Kent Meridian, on social media, so many are going to UW. So congratulations to all the students who are going to the largest flagship university for our state. I also wanted to kind of also highlight something that was brought up earlier, which was the board communication plan and about considering holding conversations with students at schools, and I'm really loving the idea. My one kind of thing I just want to open it up to, and that is, as my student representative term ends for semester 2, and that is we would need to consider with the new board communications plan, if this is built in, my only recommendation is you would, I don't know when the new board communication plan would be developed. The recommendation, though, is you would want to do it with the new student representative. So at least the student that is selected for fall semester, that is something you would also want to pass by them, and also, and therefore pass by all of the SLA. And I think another thing about that is, as we talk about the role of student representative is not just at communicate between students and the board, but also to amplify student voice. I think another great way about doing that is we can focus on that the student representative can advertise these, and advertise these not to just student leadership advisory, but advertise it across the entire district, advertise it that, hey, members of the board are going to be coming to this high school in this state, and advertise it specifically to the students that they know at that school, at that high school, et cetera, et cetera. I just want to give that little comment about when the new communication plan is developed, and you might consider that you want to consider, because, yeah. So that is my report, and I'll hand it off to next item.
All right, thank you. All right. We will now begin with the communication from the audience. As a reminder, please stick to the 3 minutes allotted, because there are a few people who would like to speak as well. We will begin with our students, and with Elsie Unger first, followed by Peyton Werner. Yes.
Hi, I'm Elsie Ungo. I am in 5th grade and at Lake Young's Elementary School. I am a percussionist in band and I sing in choir. I have a learning disability, so choir is a nice break. It's hard work, but it's nice. In a few years, I'm going to Kentridge. I am going next week to sing with their jazz choir. My choir director has been teaching us jazz. I am asking you to keep all the choirs at Kentridge and schools. Music is important to kids, so keep it. Come see the Lake Young's Choir sing jazz at Kentridge on Thursday, May 16th at 7 p.m.
Thank you. Peyton Werner.
Hi, I'm Peyton Warner. I'm in 8th grade and a 8th grader at Cedar Heights Middle School. I've been in the school music programs for 4 years. I've also been playing cello since I was 5 years old. There are some rumors going around that the music programs are being cut in schools. I feel like this decision is going to hurt a lot of people. When music programs are cut, some students have a hard time with school because they don't have anything to look forward to. Some of my best friends come to these classes because they have the same interests that I do. Some, like I, even want to become professional musicians or music teachers. If you guys cut these classes, then it's taking away an opportunity for students to study something they love. I'm lucky enough to live in a house that is music-centered and have private lessons. Today I am advocating for those who are less fortunate, for those who need public school music classes to study something they love. For some, this is their only exposure to music. Music is making a huge impact, not just on the students who participated, but in every person. Everyone listens to music to make them happy, but we can't do that if nobody knows how to make music. It has also been proven that music helps students improve students' grades and their behavior. Why would you cut something that does so much good for everyone? Thank you.
Thank you, Peyton. All right, we'll start with Christy Padilla, followed by Christian, I won't pronounce your name, Obitma, and then Karen Martin.
Am I ready? I can go? Okay. Dr. Watts and esteemed board members, first of all, I'd like to thank you for the education appreciation recognition. Our educators don't hear often enough how much they are truly appreciated, so it's nice to be recognized. Today I had the opportunity to go down to Olympia. My Vice President, Tim Martin, and I helped write a bill on teacher appreciation, and the two of us, teacher retention. And the two of us were invited down, and it was quite an honor to have our pictures taken and be recognized across the state for our work on teacher retention. It's ironic, and here's the pen that was used to sign that bill, as a matter of fact. It is ironic that I had that experience today, that I come to talk to you about the topic that I'm going to discuss with you tonight. Unfortunately, I learned this morning that not all of our teachers are going to feel the love from KSD during Teacher Appreciation Week. It's been pretty common knowledge that KSD intends to reduce the KSD community by 65 educator positions. While I knew it was unlikely that KSD would include the building level stakeholders in these conversations, I was hopeful. It was through that hope that I continued to ask for the last few months the plan for reduction and the timelines for reducing those 65 positions. I was never given an answer other than people are working on it. I was hoping that we learned a lesson from last year's debacle when the RIFs were announced. Because my colleague Alan Sutliff pushed for an answer, we learned that non-renewals, or the provisional teachers that we are trying to attract and retain, are going to be handled the exact same way as they were last year. Tomorrow, principals are going to be given a list of teachers who will be non-renewed. There will be no training on these principals about how to deliver the message. And on Friday morning, our teachers will be blindsided when they come to work to find out that they will not have a position next year. The timeline that the district has forced upon their teachers will not allow them to resign before they receive their certified letter of non-renewal. You will hear a million excuses from our leadership on why the timeline is the way it is, but the bottom line is the stakeholders were once again left out of the conversation. As long as you allow this as an acceptable practice, it will continue. Obviously, we learned nothing from last year. As long as it continues, we can only assume that you agree with this practice. Therefore, this evening, the building reps of the KSD KEA reconfirmed a vote of no confidence in our district leadership and our school board. Thank you.
Greetings to everyone here. My name is Christian Obioma Igwenyere. I live here in Covington, and I'm here to talk about something that I think it is very important for, not only for the district, but for America as well. And that is an appeal for the school districts in the state, not only this district, but all the districts, to introduce gun safety education in the school system. We have all seen the degree of gun abuse or gun rights in the US. No one can correctly give an account of the number of those who die due to gun violence in America every day. But that number is surely high every year. The way we fight cancer, the way we fight heart and the lung diseases, that's the same way we need to fight gun violence. And I think education will do a lot. Just as CPR, first aid, chemistry, biology, food science, nutrition, defensive driving course, physical education, to mention just a few, are available for everyone who would wish to study them in the schools. Gun safety education should be available. Should be a field of study, an academic subject in the school systems. I came here from Greece, from Athens. My first 2 books were published there. All my books are in conflict resolutions, international relations, and history. I saw in America in the last 3 years the rate of gun rights abuses. And that was the reason why I wrote my 3rd book. And I called it Violent Non-State Actors. Violent Non-State Actors. Untold Distractions to Peace and Young People. So, I'm here to propose this subject to your district, to my district. And it will look like this. If it is considered, gun safety education will teach students what is a gun. Students should be able to separate guns from toys. Guns are weapons. They are not toys. And who should own guns? Even though people of certain ages are constitutionally required to own guns in America, anyone who is mentally unstable, mentally indisposed, should not own nor handle guns.
Mr. Christian, thank you for your comments. We do have your paperwork. We have to strictly enforce the 3 minutes, so I apologize.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And I thank God to have my proposal.
Karen Martin.
My name is Karen Martin. I am the music teacher in this district. And I have been employed here for 19 years. And it was always my professional goal, because this was a district you wanted to work in, with the colleagues of high caliber and the programs of high caliber. And 17 years ago, the degradation started with the adoption of 5th and 6th graders having to choose band, orchestra, or general music. At this time, I'm going to make a statement about how the music teachers in this district are heard and what it's going to sound like in this district, if we keep going down this trajectory. I live and breathe music education. This is a disservice.
Okay, so we will now move to our legislative update with Director Hardy.
Yes, well, there's still more we can talk about, but I'll end briefly with what I talked about last time. Session's over. I actually did finish on time, though it went very late into the last day, but the session is over. And so I'll update on kind of 3 things that we talked about last time. The update is really the non-update. The delay in the K-3 class size did not come back in, so the law as it stands stood. All districts are required to meet the 17-to-1 K-3 class size starting next year. That includes us. Budget changes were the primary one. Final budget does increase special education funding. It increased the multiplier. It applies some safety net changes and increases and adds some professional development. I'll add some legislative commentary that at the beginning of this, when the budget writers were looking at, they estimated that anywhere between $250 and $300 million in extra funds were needed to close the gap in special education funding. The gap being special education is part of basic education, then the state should fund it completely. So of the $300 million gap, about $70 million was covered. So there is additional money for all districts, but it came well short of the gap necessary to basically fund special education with basic education. And I know that recently they're going through the budget, making sure interprets, but OSBI has already come out and said that school districts should effectively continue to rely on some of their local levy dollars to fund special education because it is not fully funded from the basic education from the state. Speaking of local levies, we're looking at, Before, when they increased the state portion of what they provided, they dropped the levy lid. No levies over $1.50 per $1,000 assessed value. That was too low, so the levy lid has been lifted, $2.50 per $1,000 assessed value, up to $2,500 per pupil. However, that's for new levies, so effectively nothing happens. We can't collect more money out of our existing levy, though I've heard other districts, because of their potential next year concerns, are considering a supplemental levy to fund that. But one of the things that was being kicked around as an amendment and did go in there, and it's a new requirement on the state auditor, that one school districts, they got to provide an expenditure schedule of what is your supplementary enrichment activities that you're using for your local levies. If the state auditor finds that the school district has used revenues for non-enrichment activities, that school district's maximum enrichment levy collection may be reduced for the future. Not been done yet, but that was a provision that was entered in there to basically prevent districts from raising extra money because they can through local levies, but then using it on basic education. So it's going to be a couple years before the state auditor might even be available with the data to do that information, but that is currently in the law as it goes forward. And any levy that any school district does now is at $250 per $1,000 assessed value. So no, it just ended, and so technically there's no more sessions needed. We would not have an open session until January of next year. But as the budget gets out, as everything kind of gets pushed out, I'll definitely have more updates as we go over, and the potential to continue to update our legislative priorities important to our school district.
That's great. Thank you. Dr. Watts, Superintendent report, please.
Yes, thank you. President Vengadaslam, members of the board, Ms. Holly, and community staff and friends. First of all, I want to just take us back to agenda item 2 and our recognitions this evening. It is incredibly important for us to be reminded early and often of how important it is for us to celebrate our teachers. And while we celebrate this week about being aware of how important our teachers are to our core business of learning, we should and do, and certainly, as I've heard, never often enough, recognize the importance of our leaders in our classrooms. They're here, and we think about why our teachers are so important. They provide a warm, caring environment for our students to learn. They ensure that our students are challenged each and every day. And most importantly, they are helping us on a day-to-day basis, the strongest lever to achieving our mission. And that mission is successfully preparing all, that's each and every student, for their futures, whatever they choose. Now, we think about futures as graduation. And I've said this to our staff earlier, and we have to be reminded, though, that our futures are somewhat even more finite. So for our kindergarten class, this year's kindergarten class, the class of 2031. Next year's entering kindergarten students, the class of 2032. Their future is first grade. And our first graders, their future is second grade. And so as we think about this work, know that it is important critically for our success. And I do know that there are challenges that exist. As Director Hardy mentioned, one of the challenges that I think people often fail to recognize is that schools and school districts, while there are 15,000 in this country, our focus and our core business is teaching and learning. Schools are also a business, and unfortunately, as we know that resources are not infinite, and we have to make some tough choices sometimes. And now it seems we're having to make more tough choices more often. One of those tough choices, and I've heard rumors, I've heard questions that have been brought forth, and our goal is to make sure that this information that we share is not only accurate, but it's timely. And the question that came about that we've heard often is, why have music programs been cut by our district at certain high schools? And follow-up question is the entire music program at Kent School District being cut? And the answer is no. However, the yes and to that is, what does that mean? It means that, unfortunately, we cannot staff each and every class unless the appropriate number of students are enrolling in those classes. And when that does not happen, we have to make certainly some choices to either reduce sections. We have not, and I repeat, we have not directed any of our secondary schools to decrease FTE or the amount of teacher time that is devoted to our music classes. However, with the elimination of our certificated FTE, we have some gaps, we have some challenges, and we cannot fully staff all of our sections, and so some of those sections have been reduced. I will say that it does not indicate our love and desire for the whole child and making sure that music is a part. We heard this morning, I don't know if I got a compliment, but I don't know if my singing with our Grass Lake Orchestra was helpful, but it did allow me to show a symbolic support for their talent, skills, and abilities. I wish we could staff at the rate that our community desires. That I grew up in a household where music clearly was important, clearly was a focus. Our goal will be to continue that in different ways. One of those ways is to make sure that we honor May as Music for Life month. Another is to make sure that we honor those music programs that continue to exist. Planning is well underway right now for music choice demonstrations in all of our elementary schools, scheduled for May 16th and 20th. High school jazz bands, chamber orchestras, and jazz choirs will travel and perform for fourth grade students to inform them of opportunities for music choice. We do need to continue to spread that word and help our students understand what the choices that they do have, that music will always be a choice in Kent School District. I would like to thank also our families, our leaders in Kent Area Council PTSA. On May 3rd, I had the opportunity to join several of our school-based leaders, central office leaders at the Kent Event Center, and thank you to our Chief HR Officer, Mariah Martin, and I was also joined by one of our school board directors, Director DeBruler, to honor the theme of this year, peace, love, and happiness. And it's not lost on me that this world, this place can use a great deal more every day of peace, love, and happiness. I was unable to stay for the entire session because I had an important student to attend to. It happened to be one of the 25,000 students who my wife and I have. The one who happens to live with us joined me for Funhouse Macbeth, and we saw the production at Kentwood on May 3rd. I appreciate, again, everyone's hard work, smart work as we bring this year to a close. It's less than, a little more than a month, and our students who are graduating will be walking across the stage. We've got that to celebrate, and I thank you. Again, we'll look forward to our next meeting and look forward to leadership opportunities that are in front of us. That concludes my report. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Watts. All right, we will begin with our board reports and Director Dance.
So again, I want to thank all of you for being here. It's always nice to see you here. I also want to express appreciation for teachers. I know it does not happen enough, and so I tend to make it a point when I run into them as I'm in the buildings, just really making sure that they are aware that, you know, their service is appreciated. What you do is appreciated. It's hard, it's rewarding, it's challenging, but it is much appreciated, and you truly make a difference in the lives of our students. So I want to share that. I have the opportunity to work with some young women at Kentwood once a week, and a couple of those young women are graduating. And as I've worked with these students over the last couple of years, for some reason this year, it seems though they are really, really under a lot of stress. They feel pressure. They are, I mean, just about every time they're in tears, and it just breaks my heart because I try to assure them that, you know, you don't have to have everything figured out right now. But that's not always the message that they get from sometimes counselors and from parents and other folks. And so I just really encourage you to, just kind of encourage, say everything's going to be okay. You don't have to have all the answers right now. This is what childhood's for. This is what graduation's for. You don't have to have all of your questions answered. Our kids are under so much pressure. It's really, really difficult to watch them go through it. So I would just encourage you to just kind of keep that in mind as we move into this time of stress and celebration and happiness. Just, if you see a kid struggling, just really reach out and just say, it's going to be okay. It's going to be okay. Because I think that's not a message that they hear enough. And unfortunately, we see that play out in some of the choices that our kids are making, sometimes life-changing choices that our kids are making. And so that was just really something that I've noticed over the last several weeks. And I really just thought that was important to just remind us, because we all get in the hustle and bustle of the end of the year. And so I know you care about our kids and you love them just as much as we do. So I just wanted to remind you of that. Also, I am looking forward to community conversations. So I would encourage you please to come out, or encourage others to come out. I think at the last one I attended, we had 2 people show up. And, and I know everyone's busy in it, but I also know it's really hard to accommodate everyone's schedule. So I would just encourage you, if there are other options that may be available. I know I'm often invited to places and to meet people, and I engage in conversations when I'm in the buildings at times. And so please just reach out. Because we do want to hear from you, want to engage with you and talk to you. So I wish you all a wonderful rest of your week. And again, thank you for what you do, and thank you for being here.
I, as Dr. Watts said, attended the PTSA Founders Day Scholarship fundraiser, and it's always a lot of fun, and it's, you're putting your money towards scholarships for students, so that makes it doubly rewarding. I attended the Kent Meridian High School Multicultural Assembly, which is always fun, and it's really interesting because after seeing it multiple years in a row, I see that the different groups are doing different things, which is they're not just repeating the same thing each year, which I think is really refreshing. So it's a challenge to them, and it's great for us too. I was honored to judge at the Sawyer Woods Science and Engineering Celebration. Got to look at the students' science and engineering projects and talk with the kids, and it's always a lot of fun. So I enjoyed that a lot. And this month is Drama Month. So we've got Kent Ridge Into the Woods. Up until the 11th is the last day, and Kent Lake doing Mamma Mia. I think it's up until the 11th. Kentwood is doing, as Dr. Watt said, is doing Farmhouse Macbeth, and Kent Meridian is doing Dearly Departed, and that's on the 15th, 16th, 17th, and 18th. And I just want to shout out to Jay Thornton, because the last few years that I've gone to his productions, they've just been so smart and so, the kids have been so good and they've acted so well, and the timing was just incredible. The comedic timing was incredible. And so I encourage people to go to KM and see these productions, because a lot of times people go to the musicals and don't actually always go to see a comedy or a drama. And so that's what I'm pushing today. And I will be there on one of those days, 15th, 16th, 17th, and 18th. Sunday's Mother's Day, and I just want to celebrate all of the mothers and people who act as mothers for our students, and hope that you feel honored and know that we honor you. Again, also Teacher Appreciation Week. As a teacher, I love this week, because, especially when each kid would bring in a different flower, and you stick all these random flowers in a vase, and it was always nice to have, to get the appreciation, because teachers don't always get the appreciation they deserve. And it's, when you have a student come back 10 years later and say what you've contributed to them, or 20 years later, it's pretty special. 8 years ago, when I first ran for election for the Kent School District Board of Directors, I knew that this year would be a time when I would most likely want to step back from service. Next week is the week for filing for re-election. I've decided not to file. I want to thank all the dedicated people who serve the students of KSD, those who teach and those who support those who teach. This is not easy work, but it is so rewarding. We have a lot of work to do yet, going through up to November, and so I'm in it till the very end. So, thank you.
Well, I'd say, having an eventful 2 weeks, waiting for the end and then finally digesting that final budget, and kind of use what I've done over the past 2 weeks to kind of give a primer. So anytime we have a community conversation coming up, we talk about anything. It's an open agenda, but I'm going to give a couple of primers, especially for the things that the board has to do. And so, when I hear a lot about what people like, or specifically what they don't like happening or what they don't want to go, we hear a lot about, what I quote unquote call certain supplemental enrichment activities. Those are the things that people like. Those are the things that people notice most when they go away. And that we, as you might have reiterate what we've heard from Ben Rarick, that we are kind of at this low point. We're at the lowest in local levies that we can collect, and in the history, and then with some uplift in the lowest in the foreseeable future. But we've got to make those decisions about what we need to do, such as meet K-3 class sizes, such as meet previous bargaining agreements, to do all the things that we've already agreed to do, and then with what's left, decide what we want to do. And so that's my primer for the conversation, is we don't have the ability to do everything we want to do. So I want to hear from the community, what should we do, what can we do, and what's important in the short term and in the long term. A lot of the conversations I've had, it's about a dip. It's about now it's the point, things have been going down and then now it's the worst. Or now we're at the lowest, or now I've had this before. But I wanted to kind of give the uplift. I attended my daughter's kindergarten orientation today. She's the class of 2032. So, and not even being my youngest, looking at 13 plus years of doing whatever the school district can do. And so I'm interested in that kind of long-term thinking for those community conversations upcoming this week.
Right. Debbie, still there?
I am.
All right.
So I wanted to start off first with really, I appreciated the words that were given in honor of Dr. Mary Newell tonight. I know that she had been a great leader in our district and all the things that she did, as well as our ability to be able to recognize our nurses and our teachers and for the things that they do for our students every day. I know that being now a mother of a teacher, I know get a little bit more of an understanding of all the things that they go through and the different things and how deeply our teachers really care about our students. And I really do truly appreciate that. I also wanted to let people know that after much discussion with my family, and particularly my husband, who will remind me that he has graciously shared my time with the district over the past 12 years, that I have decided not to seek another term, and I will not be running again for next year. I will be completing my term, and I do have a deep respect for all of our staff, family, and students, and it has really been my honor to serve over the past 12 years. I was reflecting, I've spent the last 31 years of my life doing something in conjunction with students and education, either through PTA and serving through various levels up through the state, and then the past 12 years on the school board. But due to some changes in my family, I'm looking forward to spending, over the past 4 years, I've had 4 grandchildren, and I'm looking forward to being able to spend some more time with them. As well as you may have noticed, my work demands have gotten a little bit more demanding and requiring me to be out of town more often, which I do appreciate our board and its flexibility in allowing me to join from different areas. So that concludes my report. Thank you.
Thank you, Debbie. All right, I make mine very brief. I want to also first express my appreciation for our teachers and our nurses and how great it was to speak to the children of Dr. Newell. So I appreciated that opportunity. And I wanted to apologize for missing our PTSA Founders Day and our jazz concert this Friday. Unfortunately, I've some family matters I need to take care of, but I did buy tickets, so I have 2 tickets if anybody's available to go to the jazz concert on Friday. I look forward to our community conversation tomorrow at, where are we? Kentwood. Kentwood. And I also, I think, Karen, you may have wanted to say Jenkins Creek instead of Sawyer Woods. We were both judging.
I apologize.
Yeah, we were both at Sawyer Woods as well, and really enjoyed that, and thank you for that. As both of you said, thank you, Karen, Debbie. There's a lot of work to do ahead, and we appreciate that you'll be here to help us with that. Okay, and with that, thank you all for attending. I appreciate being here. Have a good night. We're adjourned.
Thank you. There's 3 folders.
Thank
Thank you.
It's just everything I wrote.
Make sure I'll sign all these.
Oh, really? No, I did.
Yeah.
I'm sure I did. I'm sorry.
Yeah,
but
no, you're totally fine. It's just,
Yeah.
I've just been.
It's horrible. It's hard. It's so hard for kids.